Hello, everyone. Welcome to a live stream all about how to stop overthinking the memory palace, one of the number one problems that holds people back. They don't take action because they're thinking about this technique more than they're actually diving in and using it. So if you're joining us, hit that thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking, how things are going. And one of the very interesting things that inspired me to cover this topic is this quote that someone said they weren't even sure came from Einstein, but they quoted Einstein anyway, saying that thinking is the hardest work. That's why so few engage in it. Now, I don't know if that's actually true, and we always have the problem of people quoting things out of context, and in this case, we don't even know if it actually came from Einstein, but in any case, this is something that is probably like many of the Einstein quotes that people throw out randomly, not only completely out of context, but completely incorrect in most contexts. So, hello, Adolfo. Thanks for joining, and thanks for saying hello. If you're joining us, hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking, and let me know that you can actually hear. Anyway, that was one thing that inspired this, and also another thing that inspired this is I recently did a memory palace a new memory palace network and went through the whole exercise that I always teach, and it's a whole 13 pages to get through it all, and there's just a ton of them. We don't have to go through them all, but it really involves not thinking too much, because if I think too much, it takes too long and it never really happens. It's precisely the opposite. It's that you don't want to think too much because thinking is too hard in this particular case. You don't need to think about the memory palace technique. You don't need to think about any of these techniques. And we'll talk about why that is true, why that is so important, and how to get yourself there so that you're not getting caught in what they sometimes call paralysis analysis. And part of the problem is that these techniques kind of enable a kind of analysis paralysis. And when I look at the things that I'm doing, and I got so many things to do, I'm not really in analysis paralysis. I'm in the opposite. I need 12 of me to cover all the projects just on this page. And how do you get there? Well, I used to be there. I used to be in analysis paralysis, and now it's just floods of ideas. It has nothing to do with being creative. It has nothing to do with having some special anything. It's I trained to do it and to unlock all of that. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Let me know if that sounds interesting to you. Hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking, and that you enjoy this. And Reclaiming Life is here. Excellent. Good to see you as always. And so before we dive into some of the particulars here, for those of you who are here or in the Magnetic Memory Method Mastermind group, bam, something new for you, uploaded now in your area in the memory vault. Very excited. Morpheus has a lesson for you, and I think you're going to find it very, very useful if you do its due diligence. And Daniel is here. Good to see you, Daniel. Paralysis analysis. Yeah, we're going to smash through that today. For those who have ears to listen and eyes to see, we'll get rid of that. Paralysis analysis. So, thanks everybody who is here today already, live and active. Hit that thumbs up if you're not already involved and engaged. And we're going to have some calls later if you feel like calling in. And that number is this, but I won't be answering it until later. So we've been having a lot of, look at those numbers. We've been having a lot of fun with the live stream calls when people like to do it, but I'd like to organize them into a particular time. So if you call now, I ain't going to answer, but if you call later, then we will. But now you have it in time for that, if you want to save it for that moment. All right. So also coming soon, later this week, we've got some new memory exercises for you. So when you see that in your YouTube notifications, go and watch it and hit like and get involved in the discussion, because these are really powerful exercises coming soon. And also, as I announced, there's a new course coming, and I'm about 20% through the production. It's going to be great. There's 8 modules, and really excited. It's just a matter of boom, focus. And it has a lot to do with this right here. And this is so much fun. So if you are a creative person or you're someone who needs a lot of ideas, highly recommend mind mapping because it just amazing, explosive. And last little bit of introductory matter here. We released last week the video version of an interview with Alex Mullen. So if you haven't heard that before on the podcast, now it's in video. And if you don't, if you're not able to read or totally understand English in your ears, you can read along with the transcript on the video. And the transcript's on the website as well. So don't miss that. And it was just kind of funny. Nelson Dulles posted on it, how long has you had this interview? Because it's from quite some time ago. But we're just making these video versions. If you like those, let me know so that we know to do more of them. And so far, it seems like people are enjoying them. All right. So back to the topic of today. Einstein, this quote that the person wasn't even sure came from Einstein. Thinking is the hardest work. That's why so few engage in it. Now, there's obviously truth to this, but there's a lot of problems with it as well. And its first problem, as I mentioned, is that it is Einstein taken out of context, as often happens with these quote warriors who think they're being clever by ripping out stuff out of context. The problem is that when you walk into a room and you want to memorize a bunch of names, or when you're learning a language and you want to just plow through a bunch of vocabulary or phrases, or you're learning math and you just want to get some equations down the hatch, you don't need the hard work of thinking about how to use the memory techniques. You just need the techniques, right? So the mechanic doesn't go to the toolbox and then have this entire process of, well, now it's time for me to think about which tools that I need. No, these tools are fitted. They have numerical systems that help you decide that's the tool for this job. This particular shape is going to fit inside of this particular screw. I'm going to go in there and go like this, and then get the job done. That's what memory techniques can be for you if you put in a little bit of preparatory work. So the most important thing to understand here is that speed from making associations in memory palaces comes from not thinking about it at all. It is something where you do your thinking in advance so that you're prepared when you want to use the techniques. It's that simple. So there's no thinking involved, really. Very, very minimal. You're actually trying to reduce that thought in the moment to the lowest possible necessary amount, because you just are going to play a game of mental Lego. And mental Lego is comprised of some tools. And when you have those tools working together, they're going to really just be like snapping things in place. Like a mechanic or someone who's a carpenter goes to a toolbox and just simply grabs the right tool for the job and gets it done. That's all that this is. So the whole idea is that you have those tools ready to go for yourself. And they are comprised of a memory palace network, definitely a network, not one memory palace, not two memory palaces, but as many as you can get, right? And then you can start to think of your memory palace networks, which is why I created a brand new network, as an individual toolbox. This is a toolbox for a particular goal. This has the tools to achieve a particular outcome. And then you have multiple toolboxes. And inside those toolboxes are tools. So the memory palace is almost like a collection of toolboxes in which there are tools. Anyway, that's already overthinking it, isn't it? But there's different mental models. Don't get hung up on this or that model. Just figure out the mental model that's going to work for you and start to apply it in action. Adolfo says, I believe this quote is from Lincoln. Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I'll spend the first 4 sharpening the axe. Love that, Adolfo. Thumbs up, everybody, for Adolfo. That's exactly right. Whether it comes from Lincoln or not, it is certainly attributed to him. That is precisely what we're thinking about, is our axe sharp enough? So that's another great way of thinking about it. So first tool, or toolbox, as the case may be, is the memory palace network, right? And by the way, this is 13 pages to get together 26 memory palaces. This took about 5 minutes to put together. And we'll talk a little bit more about how long you should spend on these things. But if you're spending more than 5 minutes to get 26 memory palaces, then you just need to learn how to do it faster, because it shouldn't take that long. Nobody should ever have to take that long. However, some people will be rusty and in the beginning, and it's just practice. and getting started that lets you build up that speed. So there's your first tool. The next tool is some kind of alphabet list or celebrity list. You'll see different people use different terms for this all throughout, but you must have some kind of list of figures that you're able to draw upon, that you've figured out in advance. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you've memorized them in advance, but you've done some sort of exercise in order to ensure that you actually have this list on the go and the ability to generate them, because sometimes, you don't necessarily use all the ones that you've assembled, but you just leap to other ones. So this is very simple. And in some ways, your Memory Palace network can help begin an alphabet list or celebrity list, or it can be a way that you start to loosen up your gears to help you generate these ideas. And a celebrity list, incidentally, doesn't necessarily have to do with famous people. It can be friends, it can be family, it can be teachers that you've had, or you could have individual lists, your friend list, your family list, your teacher list, etc. But I tend to think of celebrities as just the stars, the big people who are very, very prominent in your mind. So they don't all have to be famous. But if you really get into this, you'll probably wind up creating multiple lists throughout your career as a mnemonist, which is highly recommended to do. So Chromo and Walken is here. She has a meeting to build back at 10. Awesome. Look forward to that. All right, so there's one of the tools that you'll want. And again, it's like something that you grow several tools with. And you want both some sort of fixed references that you'll draw upon, but also ones that you'll change, ones that you'll just spontaneously come up with. And you're much more likely to spontaneously come up with them because you are in practice, ready to go. So when I was thinking here, I was just starting my new Memory Palace network, I was instantly like, oh my God, Adam, I know another Adam. And then I just thought, oh, I better stop, because all the Adams I know, I thought of yet another Adam that I know. And it's just, and there's sometimes a border blur, right? Because not all the people will necessarily have individual memory palaces you can draw from them, or they won't necessarily be that individual in your mind. So someone like a Mike might remind you of a movie. So that movie theater might become the memory palace because you're working with Mike, with whom you once saw a movie. And there's an interesting story there. I have this interesting habit, which is that movies, even though I was a film professor, movies give me narcolepsy. So I fall asleep a lot when I'm watching movies. And I went in grad school to see Passion of the Christ with a guy who I fondly call Boxer Mike. And he's just a really great guy. And it was so funny because the way he told the story later, he's like, and there Jesus was being scourged and whipped, and the Dr. Metivier yet to come, the future professor of film studies Metivier, is like this, sleeping the whole time. Anyway, there's a spontaneous story for you. But when I think about Mike, I can think about not only him as part of my celebrity list, but I can then think of the main actors in Passion of the Christ. I can think of Mel Gibson, the director. I can think of the movie theater where we were. I can think of all the movies that I've seen with Mel Gibson. You see, it opens up new possibilities. It helps you create multiple lists. It helps you create more memory palaces. You just got to dive in and get started. Now, either the easiest or the most complicated list that you'll ever come up with, depends on the way that you are as an individual in the now, is the major. So I prefer to call it a major method, but most people call it a major system. And the deal is that you need a means of memorizing numbers. You could also use the Dominic, but the Dominic is essentially, I would say, a variation on the major. And personal preferences really determine or dictate to which extent that you like to use that arrangement. And then it has other ins and outs that you can check out. Reclaiming Life says, Boxer Mike, did he ever bite anyone's ear? Not that I know of, and I'm not sure if there's a reference there, but I'm sure that he didn't. I hope not. I'm flipping through my movie references here to see if I can think of a bitten ear. I'm not really a big fan of boxing, so if it's referring to Raging Bull or something like that, I didn't go back and watch it because I fell asleep during that one. In any case, usually when I fall asleep during movies, I do go back and watch them. But if they were just of no particular interest or no need to know Scorsese in intimate detail, I might have let a few details fly. But I don't know if you're referring to that movie or not, or maybe The Boxer. There's lots of boxing movies, but boxing is very interesting, actually. And Boxer Mike, he wrote a very, very good grad paper and gave a presentation on boxing, which is pretty much why that he had that nickname. All right, but please do let me know what reference you're making there, William. I would love to follow along with that. The major. So the major is really a way of transforming numbers into sounds that you can then turn into words. So probably heard go through it a million times, but why not do it one more time for the record? 0 is then associated with a C or a soft S or a Z or a Z, depending where you are in the world. 0 is a 1 or, 1 is a D or T, 2 is an N, 3 is an M, 4 is an R, 5 is an L, 6 is a ch, sh, j sound, 7 is a K sound. Sometimes people use hard G. I never use the hard G. 8 is a F or V, 9 is a B or P. So once you have that going on, then you can move into your next set of tools, which would be something like a 00 to 99 PAO. And it's optional. You can have person action instead of person action object, whatever you like. I like to fuse all my characters so that the PAO, as much as possible, the person is the action and the object at the same time. So there you don't have to think about it too much, right? That's the whole thing. Reduce the thinking in the moment so that you can use the techniques to get you the stuff that you actually want to think about, which is knowledge. And so these are the tools, and you just, you get started somewhere and work on them. Adolfo says, I had a fantastic video call with Adrian from the Magnetic Mary Method Masterclass group. We invested much of our conversation discussing pre-existing math mnemonics to prepare for advanced future lectures. Excellent, excellent. It's the only game in town, right? Is always to be working on your tools, so that you don't have to think in the moment. And it's the secret, really. It's the secret at the end of the day, for all of the mnemonist, whether you compete or not. Now, there's nothing wrong with generating everything fresh every time. And I certainly have paid my dues in doing that. And I have a certain proclivity for that in some contexts. But it's also better when you have both, right? And I've seen people who have absolutely zero skills in any of this just complete the exercises for developing all these tools to get their mental Lego in order. And then all of a sudden they develop the ability to do it on the fly. So it's not a chicken or the egg sort of thing. It just gets better, period, on both sides of the scale. All right, so Chanel is in the house. Chanel, how are you doing? Good to see you. What's up with me? Well, I just got me here a new Memory Palace network. Didn't take very long. And, so much fun. And amazing and shocking every time how many things not only have I accumulated in the recent past, but that I can anticipate having as Memory Palaces in the near future, and the distant future for that matter, and how many things that I just rediscover or discover sort of for the first time that after all these years, I still never thought about it before. And it's pretty amazing. And then, there's just some leaps of logic. Sometimes there's just refinements, like little parts of houses that you never really used before. So like Ian here, this is a very, very simple memory palace, but it's still going to be a powerful one. And I've used that house before many times, but for whatever reason, I never used the dining room or the dining room table. And at the time, I didn't use the dining room table because I never really liked circles. But as people in the mastermind know, there's a very interesting thing about circles that has emerged, and now they work, and they work really well with another technique that is something you'll see at play in this month's mastermind video for those of you who are in there and ready to grab it. All right, so once you have these tools together, what are you going to do next? You're going to practice snapping your Lego together, right? Because you got your mental Lego, you've got your memory palaces where you snap your mental Lego into place. Snap is maybe not the right word. It's kind of like weaving, I think of it. But in any case, you can get all of those things together. And there's a number of things that you can work with to practice. So if you're joining us, hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world and who would like to know some of these things that you can practice with. I'm going to get myself a drink here, and we'll see how much interest there is in discussing some of the real fundamental skills to develop, but that make for a lot of fun practice. And we'll be back in just a minute to discuss that and see how things go. Discuss amongst yourselves while I'm gone.
Hey everybody, so I'm here in the Atlanta airport. I was just thinking about how grateful and thankful I am for what Anthony did for me. I do seminars all across the country, usually have about 100 to 300 people every single weekend, and one of my biggest goals was to be able to memorize their names, and started studying some stuff and learning, and it wasn't connecting as fast as it needed to, and I just wasn't connecting the dots, and started doing some research online, and there I found Anthony. And Anthony, I just want to tell you thank you very much for all that you've done. Now, man, my memorization is through the roof. I've almost reached my goal of getting 300 people at one time. I'm not exactly there yet. I'm off just by a few, but I'll get there as I keep practicing and keep connecting what I've learned from you and what you've put and you've helped me with. And so I just want to tell everybody, if you're looking to take your memory palaces and your memory techniques to the next level, I mean, Anthony's the guy. If he can help me go from not even remembering people's names, and that's the biggest issue of my life in my seminars, to actually being able to memorize over 100 and something people's names, close to 200, man, he can help any of you guys out with anything. So I just want to give a shout out to Anthony. Very thankful, very grateful for meeting you. Very thankful for the fact that as soon as I sent you an email, you responded very quickly, very promptly. You just opened up your time and gave me a scheduled time very quickly also. And the support afterwards was well above and beyond. I mean, you could have ended it right there, but he didn't. He kept emailing me and make sure I was okay, and would send me emails periodically to make sure that I was following up and following through. So again, just want to thank you very much, Anthony. As I walking through this airport, getting ready to jump on a plane to Seattle, I was just thinking about how grateful and thankful I am for you being in my life and for helping me take those steps to the next level. And if anyone is out there is ever thinking about, should I work with Anthony, the answer is absolutely, unequivocally yes, beyond the shadow of a doubt. I could probably keep going on and on. But again, thank you, Anthony. And I really appreciate you. You've been a blessing in my life.
All right. Thank you for that, Lee. That was amazing. That's a story where someone really was struggling in the beginning and then boom, all ready and able to memorize an incredible amount of names. And I mean, imagine how that feels to go from zero to walking into a room with hundreds of people and memorizing their names. It doesn't have to take that long, but you do need some practice, and then you need to practice in particular ways. So what are some of those ways? Anybody have a guess? I'm very, very curious. Well, I'm glad that inspired you to go and binge on the class. As you say, this is amazing. Now I'm off night shift. I'm going to binge watch the masterclass. Yes. And put the things into action, of course, because that's what Lee ultimately did. And one of the things that I learned from that experience helping him was that there's some things that only really make sense when you're talking one-on-one. And so that was very interesting. And one of the things was just being able to see where the notes in the song needed to connect, and then filling in the gaps in real time. So that was very, very powerful. Sophia is here. Привет, привет. Great to have you here all the way from St. Petersburg. Wow, in Russia. Amazing. Thank you for saying hello. Reclaiming Life says, I love to practice as if I were a gambler with dice and cards. Ah, yes, cards. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful stuff. I refined an old routine recently because I went to a card magic convention, and I'm not going to torture you with my sweaty, sticky hands on this live stream, but it's amazing that I can get my stuff back in action when I have a air-conditioned room. And but anyway, one of the great messages of the convention was, adding a little bit of context and meaning to the routine that you're doing. And one of the routines that I've always done that's very popular is sort of a card gambling routine. And usually the story I tell is that in my early days, I had some calls with Harry Lorraine, and I just tell in my magic routine that I always asked Harry Lorraine, how do you memorize a deck of cards? And he would always say, well, if you're a magician, you don't have to. And so then as I go through the thing, I'm just basically having this battle with Harry Lorraine. And Reclaiming Life is asking, what routine is it? It's basic. Well, it's an ace assembly at its core, but it's also a memorized deck routine. But it's a memorized deck routine with a twist. And so basically the story is I'm just like trying to get Harry Lorraine to teach me how to memorize a deck of cards. The ace assembly comes out. Then at the end, with the final reveal, at a certain point, the jokers help out, etc. So it's got a bit of a sandwich in it. Not a bit of a sandwich. It's got a sandwich in it. And I really refined my sandwich. I never thought of doing it this way before, even though I sort of have a feeling I've seen other people do it this way. It's just a way better sandwich. Like, you just don't even, if you're a magician, you don't even really notice it. It's just wow. Anyway, so it's not the name of a routine. What it is I've compiled together a number of things to quote unquote make my own routine. Now, as you and I know, nothing comes from nothing, right? Aus nichts kann nichts entspringen, which is the German from King Lear. From nothing can nothing come. So it's a compilation of a lot of cuts that I think are derived from Marlowe. I'm not sure. I mean, who knows all of the history behind that? And it's got a sandwich in it, and it's got a final reveal. And that revelation shows that the deck was memorized all along, and the message is that Harry Lorraine still don't need to memorize a deck of cards, because there's better things to do with your memory than sit around memorizing a deck of cards. Now, we know that that's not entirely true, but that was the joke in the stunt, and that's the final reveal. But anyway, I came up with a whole different presentation for the same thing, changed a couple of the mechanics, and now it's very nice because it has two blue-backed cards in the deck that you show immediately, which is a great surprise. I don't think it would look as nice with red cards in a blue back, although maybe I have to look at it. But in any case, spread open this, and there's two blue back cards in there, and it's so unusual, such a surprise. You have them removed. You say, well, we'll see what those are about later. Now, instead of jokers, there's something else, and it helps lend to the story. I gotta perform it about 100 times to be sure, but it's a lot of fun. Anyway, thanks for asking about that, and yeah, it's a great routine. All right, so who was interested? Nobody was interested in looking at the actual ways you could practice snapping your mental Lego together? That's very odd. You guys not awake out there, or are you driving? Let me know in the chat if you're just joining us, where you're at. Hit that thumbs up, and all the more so, the internet is exploding, burning down. They say they're going to maybe get rid of live streaming. Who here would like live streaming to continue? Let me know in the chat if that's of any interest to you whatsoever, and you'll get what you deserve probably, because they're everything's coming down to metrics of, are you engaged or are you not engaged, and all that sort of stuff, which is completely inhuman, has no actual respect for the 80-20 rule, and is just completely bizarre. All right, so Adolfo's interested. Reclaiming Life is always looking for more brain games, ways to practice. Excellent. So, well, the first thing is to create a Memory Palace network and create another one if you haven't. I recommend that you follow the alphabet. And, now we're getting some action here. David Jones is so active. He's got a lot of... loves the live streaming. Excellent. Thanks for letting me know, David. And by the way, that's happening. I heard from the service that I use that they've been having all kinds of problems with with Facebook, so that's why you're being reduplicated. But don't let that scare you off. I think it looks neat. It's like art. It's like Andy Warhol. Brrr, love live streaming. Excellent. Crone woman walking wants to know it all. She always watches the replay. Excellent. Cool. Reclaiming Life says live streams will always continue, if not on this platform. Independent platforms will start to offer it. Yeah, I think that's probably true. However, I would just take away the word always, because we don't know what's coming, and we don't know what governments will do in terms of segmenting the international seamlessness of the internet right now, because they certainly can. And yes, there's VPNs, and yeah, there'd be this, that, and the other thing. But we know that most people don't have time for all that monkeying around. So always is a dangerous word there. But in any case, at least we know that some people are alive and interested. So let's rock and roll, and good to know. All right. And by the way, 80-20 rule in effect if you're looking at the same numbers I'm looking at. And I don't know if you are. I don't even know if the ones I'm looking at are accurate. So I try not to pay attention to them. But always fun, always interesting. Now, the first thing to do would be names. If you think of a hierarchy of the memory skills, where would you want to start? Well, with names. So what are some simple and fun ways to start practicing memorizing names? I heard from a guy, I just read his book. Very interesting. It's Ian Stanley, Confessions of a Persuasion Hitman. The unusual rules I learned from selling over 100 million of products and services. Anyway, one of the things that he says in here is that you should always limit things to like 8 words in a subject line and all this sort of stuff. And he makes a reference to, he's like, how many bands do you know where the members of the bands have more than 4? Do you know any bands where you can name all 5 members, name all 6 members, et cetera, et cetera? And it's very interesting because it seems like we're sort of limited to that. So one major exercise you can do is go through your CDs at home, or your records, or your tapes, if you still have tapes, and then think, do I know every member in this band? If not, practice with that. And I know someone named Bill. He's working on the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and memorizing things around that. It's a cool project. And I don't know exactly all the extent to what he's doing, but going year by year. And that's a cool project and a way of practicing names. So doing bands. Also, if you know movies, you can work with movies. You can go through movies and think, okay, what are the directors of these movies, for example? Or if you're interested in animation, who are the animators? Or whatever you might be interested in. Maybe you want to get a job in the film industry and you're very, very interested in CGI or something like that. So you could go and learn all the names of those people. Then from memory, type into Google those names and look them up. That's just a simple way to practice name memorization. What's important about these kinds of practices is they're low stress. You're not, going into a room and memorizing a bunch of names and, going cold the first time you've done it, all stressed out. No, you just are practicing memorizing names in a low stress environment. And of course, you can go into restaurants and memorize people's names, and you don't have to actually, test it. You can test it silently by, when they're gone, writing down what their name was, and then when they come again, noticing what their name was, and then checking the record. Easy, low stress. Not a problem. And it's great brain exercise to be doing that all the time. I mean, you could do this many, many, many times throughout the day. And if people don't have their name tag, you could just ask them. And then there's nothing, like no one's going to notice if you've actually memorized their name and you come back the next day, and you say, sorry, what was your name again? And then they say, oh, Sophie or whatever. And then you go, oh, yeah, that's what it was. But you actually are just confirming that you got it right. Like there's no need to show off. In other words, you can just practice low key, low stress, and build your skills over time. Very, very important. Reclaiming Life says bands are also interesting with changing members at times. Yes, and that's another thing that you could do is what year did they change? So when I think about Metallica, it's not really that clear what year Jason Newsted came in. And it's not entirely clear to me. I have a general idea, but it's not entirely clear to me what year Jason Newsted left, right? So that's an interesting little project to think about, and it actually makes the music more interesting when you think about dates and so forth. All right. Chanel says live streaming should be continued on Facebook because it brings a wider audience of people together on a variety of different subject matters. Well, let's hope so. We don't know what's going to happen anyway. Personally, I'm taking a bit of a detox on internet news, but always strange and weird world. Wonderful. Just keep on enjoying. Claiming Life says memorizing the names of people on TV shows or in movies, whether their name of who they are performing or the actor's real name. Yeah, actually, now that you mention it, that could be a cool split column approach. So imagine you create tracks in your memory palaces. So if I were to take this one here, very simple and small, it's sort of like a multi-stage memory palace. And instead of it being 1, 2, 3, 4, it's like 1A, 1B. So it could be Keanu Reeves and Neo and Mr. Anderson as well. And then, think about on one side Morpheus and then what is his name? Lawrence Fishburne. Woo! It's a little slow in the gears today. And so on. Then you go to the third station, Carrie-Anne Moss, I think was her name, as Trinity, and so forth. I was going to say Carrie-Anne Fisher, but I don't think there is such a person. Anyway, good exercise. And that actually raises another thing. A cool thing that you can do is, even without doing any memorization, and this is building your celebrity list, you can do exactly that. Was it Carrie-Anne Fisher who played Trinity? And write down and think through your favorite movies and see how many names of the actors you can get. And one of the things when you think about a movie like The Matrix is that it's essentially an ensemble cast. It still has basically 4-point opposition, so you have basically sort of 3 bad guys and three main good guys. But it's a lot of movies are very simple, so you don't have a huge amount to do, but it's just an excavation exercise. Carrie Fisher, yes, I'm aware of that, but for some reason I think it's Carrie-Anne Moss is the name of Trinity. She just seems to have disappeared from the movie world. But in any case, that's an example of an exercise to go through. And William was very interested in that, so that's something to do. Is how deep into a movie can you go into? Like when you think of the guy who played Cypher, I bet you if I stop and think about it, I could probably get his name back, but I've never memorized his name. And so that's like a quote unquote sort of weak point. But then instead of going and looking it up, just ponder over it for a couple of hours. And could you come up with it? You'd be kind of amazed. And one of the neat things about doing that is you train your tolerance and your patience for not remembering things, and you make it easier to sort of let it go. Practice letting it go, and then you'll be amazed. Unless one of you puts it in there in the chat, please don't. I'm gonna probably later today all of a sudden be like, that's what that guy's name is, right? And maybe not, but that often happens. So think about how that you can do those sorts of things and delay your gratification. Allow yourself to actually sweat it out, but practice letting go, sweating it out. And then it'd be like, oh, that's what that guy's name was. And that's just a great way to play around with your memory, exercise it, stress, and so forth. Sue says, do you have a success story of an accounting student using the magnetic memory method? I'll have to think about that. And no one comes to mind. But what about an accounting student would help convince you any further? There's many people who've done many great things with math and numbers, from programming, and Adolfo may be still here right now. He's doing stuff with math right now. So I'm wondering, what specifically are you looking for that you need to hear that would have anything to do with accounting? It's a bit of a mystery to me. So let me know more, and we'll see what we can come up with. And I will ask. I'll probably find you one. But the important point here is, people should not get caught up in the idea that information in this category is somehow special and requires some special technique. It isn't, and it doesn't. There is no special information that's somehow impervious to memory techniques or somehow has an extra challenge to memory techniques. If there is, it doesn't exist, to my knowledge, and I'd be very, very curious to know what it is. If you just focus on developing the systems that we're talking about today, it doesn't matter what the information is. It really doesn't. So names. There's some ideas for names for you. And would names help you with accounting? Absolutely, because every term in accounting is the name of that term. There's no actual difference between bill and what's an accounting term? I don't know, subprime. Maybe that's not an accounting term. But bill and subprime only seem different in your mind. But there could easily be a child named subprime. Frank Zappa had a daughter who he named Moon Unit, right? So it's an arbitrary difference between, he could have named her Lisa, but he named her Moon Unit. And only in our minds is there somehow a difference, because we're like, well, a moon unit would normally be, something sent to the moon. It's not different, though. It's just letters arranged in a sequence that we're then going to encode using different tools. So the name tools are very much the same as the vocabulary and phrases tools. There's just a few little differences, because in names, if you know a bill, then you can take another bill and associate to that bill. But some people actually don't use that approach with names, and they find that difficult. I happen to use multiple approaches, but if I can think of a bill and then associate another bill with that bill, then I will. I was just at a meeting last week, and I memorized a guy's name. His name was Bill, and I thought of Bill Bixby, right? And to put some extra cream on the top, he just started to explode, big and green. Bill Bixby may or may not mean anything to you, and why he would be exploding big and green may be a mystery to you, but it doesn't matter because it's easy for me. But if his name had been Moon Unit, then I would have seen the moon coming out of his head, or had the moon crashing down on his head, and maybe I would have associated it to Frank Zappa's daughter. I don't know, that didn't happen. But there's nothing particularly important about any kind of information. What's important is the tools and your ability to apply them. And this is one of the reasons why the memory competitions have a number of disciplines, because those disciplines aren't there to say, oh, wow, that guy's particularly skilled with abstract images. No, they're there because the comprehensive master of these techniques is able to just do it regardless of the information. And they're collecting points based on, the overall, at least in some of the competitions. I don't know how every single competition under the sun is run, but it's very important to understand. It's comprehensive, and it's based on your ability to disregard the individual nature of the information and get it done anyway, because it's just information. Information is all the same at the end of the day. So Sue says, I'm studying for the CPA, lots of rules and regulations, more theory than calculations. Your explanation makes sense about the application of the tools. Great. So rules and regulations. I would have thought that there would be some mathematical formulas in there, but if it's just rules and regulations, then you just want to develop the skills for that. And in terms of people who memorize rules and regulations, there are lots of lawyers, and we have stories from lawyers. If you need them, just reach out from email or go to magneticmarymethod.com/masterclass, and there's a testimonial from a lawyer there, right there waiting for you. And it was all rules and regulations. He was really worried, actually, that he wasn't going to pass the bar. No problem. So there's that ready for you to go. And thank you for clarifying. That helps. All right, if you're just joining us, hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking. And Sue, understand that the key difference here, and it's the whole point of today's live stream, is to not overthink this too much. It's just to actually follow the steps and develop the tools, and then use those tools, practice those tools with the information you want to memorize, and just get it done. As Adolfo said earlier in the chat history here, if you are able to scroll back, I don't know how it appears for you. If you just look through there, he's like, yeah, I'm up on the call with Adrian, and we're working on getting our tools together. That's what it is. And then it's the practice of the application of the tools. And the only difference between the people who succeed with these techniques and the people who don't is very, very simple. It's that some people, they just want to continue to be themselves, and other people want to be Batman in the mind, right? Batman, the only difference between Batman and anybody else is that he trains and he develops the tools that he needs for the job, right? Now, none of those tools that he has in his special belt there, right? And sometimes he gets help from people to help develop those tools. But notice that those tools all exist in the world already. A batarang is just a boomerang that's shaped like a bat, right? He's a genius because he's taking pre-existing elements in the world and he's putting them out there. So, basically, do you just want to continue to be yourself, which is okay? Or do you want to develop a superhero memory identity and be the person who trains to be able to make things happen when you need it, right? That's all it is. Adolfo says, Maricela from the Magnetic Memory Method Masterclass is studying for her insurance exam, and she is having great success with covering insurance concepts into mnemonics. Yes, yeah, that's true. And those of you who are in the know why I made my little wink there. And if Maricela is watching the replay, hello, Maricela. How deep into memory habits go. I think I'll just call her Maricela from now on. See if I can get it right. All right. So vocabulary and phrases. What are some exercises you can do for vocabulary and phrases? Very simple. There's a lot of random word generators out there. Type into Google random word generator. Or if you want to avoid digital amnesia, you can just get a bunch printed out, chop them up, and put them in a hat. Maybe get a dice, roll the dice. Dice says number 5, then you pick out 5 words, you memorize them, and away you go. Memorizing phrases, I personally just like to memorize some sort of ancient text or whatever is going on, and that's what I'm doing for practicing phrases on an ongoing basis. But if you memorize cards, essentially you're memorizing phrases. It's just that the phrases are not words. They are words, but they're phrases anyway. And if you think of them as phrases, I think that'll really help your practice there. And then you translate that to the actual memorization of other things. The next category is numbers. And so numbers, as we talked about, would require the major or some sort of system anyway. There are some people who just memorize numbers by rote. So that is possible as well. It's just not very fun or effective. So developing some sort of system for that. And some fun and easy ways to memorize numbers is just to get a deck like this and practice memorizing numbers. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. A lot of fun. So you can also go to the store and memorize the prices of the items at the store and do some mental calculations along the way as you go to your checkout aisle. See how well you did when you see the final price. You can memorize the dates of different movies or albums or all kinds of things. There's many, many things, historical dates and so on. There's so much to be appreciated from that. And, you begin to see how the world connects so much more when you do that kind of work. Now, one of the number one questions that I get all the time is, how long should all of this take? And the reality is, well, does anybody have any guesses how long it should take to be very, very good and skilled with these memory techniques? Let me know in the chat if anything comes up for you. Let's put it this way. If you don't have a guess how long it should take, how long would you like it to take? How long would you like it to take? And maybe if Adolfo's still here, how long did it take before you got some great results and you just thought, wow, this is amazing? That would be interesting to know. It doesn't matter if it took months or it took weeks or days or years. There's an interview on the Magnetic Memory Method podcast where Kevin Richardson says that he just abandoned the whole idea of using memory techniques and came back a year later. And the next thing you know, he's memorizing 30 Japanese kanji per day with multiple readings for them. So it can take some time. It certainly can. All right. So in the absence of any participation whatsoever, we'll continue on. Only you have the answer. That's the long and short of it. Nobody knows. Nobody can know. And the reality is nobody needs to know. You don't need to know how long it will take. But as some general indicators, most people only need 2 to 5 hours to get all of these tools together. So Adolfo says to really get it, a few months. Great. I'd love to know what really get it means. If you're able to share more particulars around that, that may help people. In my case, I would say to really get it, I was probably a few months as well. Even though I had this amazing first initial experience, not everybody will have that. But in my case, get it was not memorizing cards. Memorizing a deck of cards in your first 15 minutes of practice is like great. But that didn't help me with, well, how do I then use this to study for my university stuff? How do I do this so that I'm able to also, get up to speed with some language requirements? That was not clear to me at all. And it was definitely a couple months of study. But it wasn't just studying the techniques, it was continually refining the practice and doing a lot of self-exploration, self-experimentation, and analyzing what's happening to see how to improve. And it's also like another level of mental Lego. You snap on understanding. So Chroma Walking says 2 months into my night shift to understand PAO. Excellent. I would say I'm still understanding PAO. And that's kind of the point. And that's why I say you don't even need to know how long it will take, because it's a lifelong adventure and more understanding is available through more practice, and you begin to see how things come together. And there's many ways where it's actually kind of difficult to explain some of what these connections are, and that's because a lot of it is a behavior. It becomes a part of your identity. It becomes, are you Bruce Wayne or are you Batman? Well, you're both, right? And you're able to sort of divide those things. You have your everyday life, but you have this identity that has this deep understanding of the world that only that identity can have, because that's the identity of the mnemonist, and you're only a mnemonist if you're taking action, if you're practicing these things all the time. And then you have, this other person that reflects on those. And anyway, maybe that's a bit abstract, but I think very powerful. Anyway, the whole thing is that doing the developing is as important as having the systems. In fact, it's probably even more important. You need to be doing the developing. And that just comes down to finding a starting point. And sometimes, if you don't know where to start, you need to think of a goal. What is it you would like to achieve? What would you like to accomplish? If you can figure that out, then it can become more clear what the starting point is. But I think the starting point has already been expressed, because there's a universal need for spatial understanding in memory techniques. So I recommend you start with the memory palace. And the memory palace technique has some moving parts. But from there, you develop all your moving parts as you learn it. And those are things like your celebrity list and the major. So developing them through doing is the most important thing of all. And this is what gives you confidence. It's what gives you courage. It's what gives you the creativity that's needed. And you'll find that you have more ideas for these things than you ever imagined possible. And you have more fun and adventure because your brain comes to life. It's like fireworks in the brain. It's the ultimate brain exercise that leads to the ultimate brain fitness. So if you haven't gotten started yet, I highly recommend that you get the free course at magneticmemorymethod.com/YT, and then you complete your first Memory Palace network. This is very, very important. And this is so essential. It's hard to express just how essential it is, because people need to experience spatial memory, and you will want to have a number of memory palaces. And I don't know why some people are stopped, other than that they're overthinking it a lot of the time. And it's kind of useful sometimes to think about it exponentially, to do the numbers. Well, yeah, if I want to memorize this much stuff, then I'm going to need that many memory palaces. But the truth is you don't need that many memory palaces, and then you can end up arresting yourself in paralysis analysis. You can freeze yourself with this fear of, oh, that's a lot of work. But you will not, you'll almost certainly not need that amount of memory palaces. But even if you did, if you could push through that, what will happen is you'll be, oh, I can definitely come up with that amount of memory palaces, no problem. So the reality is you still just need to keep doing and doing and doing and not overthink it. Thinking has its place, and you want to just have the stuff that you memorize so that you can think about that as soon as possible, and then you'll see a world of potential. It's an abundance mindset, and space is abundant. Space is so abundant. Megaston topos hapantagar kori. Space is ultimate because it contains all things, and all there is space. Boom. There's a memory exercise that I'm putting together for you all now that is going to demonstrate to you within seconds just how much space you have available to yourself at all times. So memory palace network is incredibly important. Adolfo says, I skipped through the masterclass and cherry-picked what I thought was what I needed. It was only when I went through the entire masterclass and practiced as I went through it when I got it. Excellent. Yeah, that's a sort of an issue that we're working on solving. And look, everybody has that problem. I also sometimes take courses. I want to cherry pick what I think that I want. But the reality is that the person who put the course together put those things there because that's what they think you need. And if you just say, well, no, blah, 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 then you're going to get results that sound like, blah, 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 blah. It's just going to be garbled, right? You need to go through things thoroughly. And it's just so hilarious to me how many people, and it's hilarious in a sad way, a tragic way. But then it becomes funny because it always leads to this great success, is people say, well, how do I do this? And I say, well, that's covered in this course. If you complete the whole course, you will see all your questions are answered. And not only that, everything will happen for you because some of the gold is at the end of the rainbow. In fact, most of it is. And this is something that I really, really highly recommend. It doesn't matter, my courses, anybody's courses. Take them from beginning to end. There's a YouTube video all about how to take memory courses that is golden to you if you have any ideas or any problems with creating a path through which you can take courses from beginning to end. But it's the only game in town to understand things. So thanks for your feedback there, Adolfo, on that. Adolfo says, also, I did not have memory palaces prepared in advance. Trying to create memory palaces while creating mnemonics was exhausting. I now have hundreds of memory palaces. Awesome. Thumbs up to that. If you haven't hit the thumbs up yet, hit it for Adolfo. That's exactly the point. If you're trying to create them as you go along, you're just overwhelming yourself. There's interesting ways to think about it. But the worst thing to do when you're beginning is to try to create the memory palaces as you're going along. That's not going to work. And you need multiple of them because you need to make mistakes. You need to make mistakes. And you need to have the wherewithal to push through mistakes because you will make them. I make them all the time. That's what life is. Life is a giant ground of making mistakes. The trick is to not get personally involved in the mistakes, right? They're just there. There's no right to them. There's no wrong to them. There's no good to them. There's no bad to them. They're just part of the process. But people, I don't want to make a mistake. And I've been there, but you're going to. You're just going to, as part of the rules of the way the universe works. So don't try to avoid them. Don't try to avoid them at all. Actually, dive into them. Embrace them. Well, David is here. Good to see you, David. Glad you like the streams. Thanks for letting me know. And let me know if you have any ideas what you would like to see on a future one. All right. So that's step number 1. And this is important because it'll help you memorize all the other tools if you need to memorize any of the other tools. And if you know anything about the magnetic memory method training, I'm going to try and encourage you to not have to memorize them by doing proper excavation through your existing memory competence. And most of us are way more competent than we think. But if you don't dive in and create a celebrity list, you never oil the gears and you never see just how many associations you have on tap. So complete a celebrity list. It's very, very simple, very easy. Again, understand that when I talk about a celebrity list, I mean anybody who's a star in your life. You can certainly just focus on actors. You can focus just on politicians, just on musicians, friends, whatever. You can have different lists. At the end of the day, the whole point of having the lists is not to be like, look at me, I got me a list. It's that you use it. You use it. So if I had met this guy Bill and I didn't have a Bill on track, well, I can at least use my Batman character, which is also Christian Bale, right? And now I just randomly thought of Bill Bixby, but now I can actually add Bill Bixby to my list of characters. When I think of B, alphabet list, celebrity list, B, Batman, B, Christian Bale, B, Bill Bixby, bum, 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 bum. It doesn't matter. And you can have as many as you want, but you get that amount of people by diving in, creating these lists for yourself. And that's how you get it. And you can just start to think all kinds of different B's. You know, what about Bob? All of a sudden comes to mind, right? And then think, how many people do I know named Bob, etc. So get in and get started and keep going. It's very, very important. You don't stop doing push-ups at the gym, right? No, you continue doing push-ups. Speaking of push-ups, I started. Speaking of push-ups and taking video courses, one of the courses that I've taken in my life from beginning to end, very important, is the Wim Hof method. And I revisited it and started doing push-ups without breathing again. Wow, so much fun. So I had stopped doing that for a while and now doing that again. It's winter in Australia, which always brings Wim Hof to mind because you can actually finally have cold showers again. But great stuff. So if you haven't done that, I recommend it. See a doctor first, though. All right. Now, the next step for you is to pick a meaningful learning project. I really can't recommend this enough. So many people, the book, memorize a shopping list. If it's going to be a shopping list, memorize it in another language. Now, obviously, I'm being dramatic and joking, and there are some people for whom memorizing a shopping list would be a huge accomplishment, so please see my humor in that. But also, there's truth in the humor. What are you doing memorizing shopping lists? Like, do you not remember what you like to eat? Or if you're a chef, well, then maybe there's a different thing, but shouldn't you have someone doing the shopping for you? The point is that you could be doing something that will improve your life. I don't know what that is for you, but chances are if you sit down and you do some reflection, yeah, it would be really great if I knew these numbers, or it would be really great if I knew these facts, or it would be really great if I knew this terminology. Heck, I might even get a raise and a promotion as Jesse Villalobos did when he applied these techniques. Yeah, okay, maybe it's a little bit boring to think of product names and serial numbers, etc. as your memory practice, but it ain't boring when you're taking more home to the bank, is it? Not for a second. You might find that it even makes you inspired to memorize more, right? So that you're the go-to guy. He got promoted. The raise is one thing. He got promoted, which leads to future opportunities and so on and so forth. So, bam, that's what I'm talking about, meaningful learning project. And you'll get a bit of grit from it. You know, you get a little bit of wherewithal so that the next thing that comes along, you'll be like, I can memorize that. No problem. No problem at all. All right. So basically, you get to enjoy learning a skill that skills you. This is the most amazing thing of all. All right, we're going to take a little bit of a break, and then if anybody wants to dial in, we'll put the number up on the screen for you again. Scott is here. Good to see you, Scott. And we'll be back in a minute and then taking some calls if you want to call. I don't know if people want to call or not, but if they do, then that's what we'll do. And see you in just a second.
384626 4338 3279 5028 84 1971 69 399375.
Hi, my name is Paul, and I've taken a few courses by Anthony Metivier, but I felt that the experience of doing it today live was the biggest advantage. Anthony has a gift in simplifying complex concepts, and I feel that I've really come away today with practical skills that I can now use effectively. It was great to immerse ourselves in the situation, to be able to apply the time, because when we're at home we may not take the time to do the memory exercises that we were doing today. I felt particularly that the thing that we did at the end of today was something that is totally unique in memory training, which is 3 days of memory, which is how to practice your skills. I've read many memory books and I've never come across a system laid out as to how to practice what you've learned, and this is what I gained today from Anthony's course. So I'd give it 10 out of 10. Thank you.
53 42 1170 679.
All right. So we are back and going to take some calls. Let me see how this is going to work. Very, very interested to see, but all kinds of buttons and stuff. We were successful before, but it just wasn't very loud, I was finding. But a lot of people have said that they like it. If you want to dive in and give us a call, there is the number. And while we do that, one of the things that's so interesting about that story from Paul that we just watched is, there's a great interest he has in the memory tradition itself. And he's not only putting the things into practice in that way for fun and for the practice of it, but also certainly to deepen his knowledge of the techniques so that when he writes as a scholar about them, he has that in his mind. And one of the ongoing criticisms of The Art of Memory by Frances Yates is that she never used the techniques. And so one cool thing is that more people are using the techniques before they write about them. And speaking with Lynn Kelly last week was great because she's also a scholar and she uses the techniques. And so there's a lot of many more finer and interesting details that come as a result of that just simply aren't there when there are these books about memory techniques that people aren't using. So, whoa, here we go. Hello, you are on. That was loud. Hello? Oh, I'm not sure if you can actually hear. Hello, how are you?
Hey, how you doing?
Good, who's this?
This is Scott.
Scott, my man. How are things going over there? Where are you at?
I'm in Massachusetts.
Wow.
That's where I am.
Cool. What's going on with you and your memory today?
It's going very well. I actually called to ask a question.
Okay.
And I was wondering, is there any correlation between the art of memory and rapid reckoning? Do you know anything about that?
Tell me about rapid reckoning. I've not heard this term.
So rapid reckoning, it was in the 1800s, was a advanced memory technique to do very fast arithmetic and calculations in your imagination and memory without the need of pen and paper or need of a calculator.
Right. So in other words, it was calculation.
It's calculation, yes, but using memory techniques to do advanced arithmetic and calculation. I haven't had a chance to look into it too deeply myself, but I was wondering if you have any memory techniques to improve mathematics. Right.
Well, yes, and great question. I haven't looked into mental calculation that much, but it seems to me that a lot of what's going on there is the remembering of particular rules and principles to use them and when to use them and how, and then practicing the use of them. Does that make sense? So it would be remembering procedures. So what I have looked into, usually what they're teaching there is, if this is the outcome you want with the math, then remember to do this, right? And one of the things that you can look into as a practice or a way of learning this that's has teaching around it, specifically with mnemonics, is the calendar technique. And so different people teach this. Dominic O'Brien teaches it perhaps with the most detail that I've seen. And that would be a calculation where you would be able to say what day of the week February 26th was in 1854 or whatever, right? So that's kind of an easy...
Yeah, remembering dates, gotcha.
Right. And obviously that would have a particular outcome, but it's an entry point into that you could then look at different kinds of calculations you might want to do. Now, in terms of what I offer, the core goal is just, can we memorize numbers? Can we memorize mathematical concepts? Can we memorize formulas that involve symbols? And that's pretty much I was going to say that's where we stop, as if that's a bad place to stop. But in terms of rapid calculation or mental calculation, I don't do it myself, so I don't teach it. But that in and of itself is where we go, and it's very, very useful and has many, many applications. And I've thought about getting into numeracy and doing mental calculations, but I can't quite connect to how it's going to improve my life to be able to do so. So,
right.
Does that answer your question?
What do you? Yeah, it does answer my question. It really does. Can I ask one more question? Would you be okay with that?
You can ask 15 questions if you like.
I'll have one more question. Is there any link to the art of memory and phonography? Like I guess phonography, I guess it would be shorthand writing.
Right. Some people do say so, yes. Some people see a relationship between the major, for example, and some of the shorthand symbols. I don't know to what extent that is true or how it plays out, because I just simply haven't studied in that area. But that's what people have said, and it is, again, one of those things that I can't connect an outcome from, so I haven't delved into it. But if you're interested in it, then I would really recommend that you learn mnemonics, figure out if there's a way for you to snap them together, and then teach other people about it. That would be amazing.
Oh, you're great. Great. You answered my questions, honestly. Wow. I don't know what to say. Well, it's really nice talking to you for once, actually.
Oh, great speaking with you. And yeah, what do you got going on now in your learning projects?
Well, tomorrow I'm going to the library that I belong to, and we finally secured some other rare books on this, and we're going to be looking into it tomorrow with a few of my friends, my colleagues. And I mean, if you're interested at all, I'm going to be making some photocopies of these books, so I'd be more than happy to send them your way.
Please do. I appreciate that very, very much.
Absolutely.
I'm very interested in preserving this tradition, as you may know, and gathering as much stuff around it as I can. But I'm just one guy, and the more of us that can bound together, I got a lot of ideas about what we could do with the record. It's just a matter of finding it and then preparing it.
Fantastic. All right, I guess that's all I really had to say for now. I will keep in touch, and thank you.
Cool beans. Thank you for calling. Have a great day.
All right, thanks.
Take care.
Thanks for having me. All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, so that was a great call. Thank you for that. Scott, it was in Massachusetts, I think we heard. Wonderful. So let's see here. Check in with our chat. If you want to call, that's the number to call on the screen. And hopefully that sound was good for you, better this way than the previous way. Really interested in the whole call-in show stuff. Adolfo said, Scott, check out Arthur T. Benjamin. He's a mental mathematician and uses mnemonics as number placement. He has a great lecture on great courses. Oh, wow, cool. Well, I love great courses. Great courses were a lifesaver for me once upon a time. If you're just joining us, hit the thumbs up. Let me know in the chat where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking, and let me know if you want to call, because the phone lines are open. All right. Shamwang says, good morning, sir. Spelling is a problem for me. Error spelling. Could you please give some tips? And thanks for this. Is error spelling a particular kind of spelling issue? I don't know that term, error spelling, or do you just mean you make mistakes when you're spelling? Well, if you make mistakes when you're spelling, one of the things that you want to do is develop one of the tools we talked about today, which is an alphabet list or celebrity list. So let's say, just to take a simple example, a word is spelt like, what's a simple example? Help, right? So help, we're going to want Heather Locklear, we're going to want Einstein, and then we're going to want, Luke, I use often from Luke Skywalker, and then the Pope, right? And so now we can get those guys interacting to help us use our list, or help us memorize that spelling. Very, very simple. So I hope that helps you out there. And again, you want to have these go-to characters that you draw upon, and you want to be able to generate them spontaneously. So that's a super simple thing. And then when you have a memory palace, you can just arrange those characters in the memory palace and drill that down enough times so that you remember how that spelling works. And you have the characters interact with each other, etc., etc. Scott says, Moonwalking with Einstein is a great book too. Yes, indeed it is. And a little tip for you if you're reading carefully. This is in it, and now it belongs to me. Interesting. So that's for the very close readers out there of Moonwalking with Einstein. All right. So, and by the way, this inspires me greatly. I always have it here. I've had it here since I got it. And I always have to think about Tony Buzan. Shamwang says, thank you, sir. Well, thank you. And David says, is it a journey, not a destination? Indeed. Good point, David. This is all about a journey. Definitely, there is no destination. And definitely we want constant improvement. Absolutely. Great points. And that gets me back to, this whole thing where people writing books who are actually using these techniques for knowledge projects is really important. So we interviewed Lynn Kelly on the podcast. That's going to come out soon. And Memory Craft is really, really good. Highly recommend that book to everybody to read. And, the more that you just will dive in, learn these techniques from multiple angles and apply them, put them into action, the more you're going to be able to actually see possibilities in them that you may not have noticed before, and become essentially, I often make references to Batman, but Buzan had this wonderful term, the warrior of the mind, right? And who wouldn't want to be a warrior of the mind? Like, who here in the chat would say, this is the one time I'm going to invite no response, I don't want to be a warrior of the mind. I'd rather be a janitor of the mind. I'd rather be a simpleton of the mind. Like, who would want that? Nobody would want this. Everybody wants to be a warrior. It doesn't matter who you are. This ability to fend for yourself, to be able to perform when you need to and get the things done that you need to do in order to improve your life. If you don't want that, what's wrong with you? What's the problem? All right. So lots and lots of things to talk about as always, but not always all the time in the world. Adolfo asked, could I, where was that chat? I remember I saw it. Could we have a taste of your new course coming up, maybe at the end of the live stream? Well, the taste is that here is the course, but I'm going to keep it under wraps until that it's done, and it won't be too much longer. I'm aiming to get it done by the end of the month, and it should be possible to do so. And a lot of people have already asked, is it going to be just added into the masterclass. And in this case, no, it's not, because it's something that relates to what we do in memory, but is its own world, its own thing for mental performance. I wish that I knew more about mental calculation, because then I could authentically include it in there. But one of the great things about the things that I do is that I do, when they are updated, then it will be updated. And if I do numeracy, then it will be added there. Speaking of that sort of stuff, there is a cool book that you might want to look at, which is Number Training Your Brain. And I've read this and done some of the techniques, but I haven't done them all. And really, for me, the problem is that I just, quote unquote problem, I don't see how this really how this does anything for my particular existence. And one of the issues, like I always say, the cool thing is that when people who actually use these techniques write the books about them for large learning projects, then it's authentic. Then they actually can say a lot of things that is actually meaningful and help you out further. But if I don't have any particular reason, then it would just be either a stunt, or it would just fall flat, because I don't teach math, or I don't do math, and it's not the kind of brain exercise that just appeals to me, as opposed to the brain exercise of memorizing as much Sanskrit as I possibly can. Which I just love. Like, I know that doesn't connect with the world all that much. Like, oh, Sanskrit, what the heck am I going to do with that? But to me, it's like, yeah, that's amazing. And it's like the most amazing thing. I'm just totally switched on. So the lesson there for everybody is focus on the things that actually switch you on, turn you on. You don't have to be everything for everybody. You've got to just focus on what actually makes your life amazing and vibrant, and not sell out, Not sell out and do something just because you're going to get this or that reward. You might not. And then you'll just think it was a waste of time. So why waste any time whatsoever? There's an email I got the other day. Someone said, will learning these techniques make me more interested in medicine? And I said, maybe, but I would, it sounds like you got a different problem right now. And I sent them to the live stream that we did on creating a vision statement for your memory improvement goals. It's very, very important. If you're just using these techniques to accomplish a goal that you don't even really want, yeah, they could make that more interesting. But is that a gamble you really want to make? Do you really, really want to have some sort of short-term fireworks in your brain so that you could reach a goal like becoming a doctor when you didn't really want to become a doctor at all? I think it'll backfire on you. Reclaiming Life says, do you think it is better to strive to be a warrior of the mind or an Ubermensch, or do you see the warrior of the mind as part of being an Ubermensch? That's an interesting question. So I'm going to assume here that you're meaning specifically Nietzsche's Ubermensch, and if not, then I don't know why you'd be using that term. But here's the thing, and I'm just going to give you Nietzsche in a nutshell as I understand it. May not be the full, it might be not the full and correct understanding of Nietzsche, but as we know, that's not coming. And him being a perspectivist, so to speak, he knows it ain't coming either. Adolfo says, just learned a new word today, Ubermensch. Excellent, excellent. Yeah, it's a fun word. One of the things that a lot of people don't get is really, what mensch can mean. For example, it doesn't just mean human, but it also means a person of the people. And Nietzsche, one of the problems, quote unquote problems with Nietzsche, is that he makes a lot of jokes and references and allusions and all sorts of things. So that might fly over a lot of heads, especially if it's in a bad translation or you're not reading it in German. So it's not entirely clear that by superhuman, he meant superhuman in the sense of all this sort of stuff. It's a little bit more Buddhist in its approach. And that is to say, one wants to become the perfect flower of compassion for the human experience, right? And so Nietzsche, in a nutshell, would be two things, really. Because we're boiling it down and simplifying it to the nth degree in a way that I know is not that fair to Nietzsche. But it would be not that God is dead, but that if this is the way you're going to worship your God, he may as well be dead. Okay? So that's the first thing that you need to understand. That's really what's happening there. And you can extend that to your notion of yourself. Oh, you're going to be a person? Well, if that's the way you're going to be a person, you may as well be dead, right? Because that's not what a human is. A human is not a thing that's constrained by the rules of society or whatever. A real human, is not a thing that somehow goes around with messages inside of the head, constantly berating oneself and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. No, a human is something that stands up and is essentially a warrior of the mind, because the mind is needed as an integrative part of the operations of the physical body. The brain is actually produced, the mind is actually produced by the brain, right? And so if you're going to have one, then you might as well have the best possible one that you can have, right? Wyndham Lewis, who was a Nietzschean, and a very funny one, he once was reported to have, was it Aldington? I think it was the poet. Yeah, it must have been Aldington. He marched into the house of Aldington, the poet, and he needed to borrow a razor. And Aldington is watching Wyndham Lewis shave with this razor. And Lewis says this very Nietzschean thing, which is that he says, if every man is an island, might as well be a volcanic island. Oh, I've always loved that. It's so beautiful. And it's so much in the spirit of that Nietzschean thing. So that principle is that we are in a great state of becoming. There is no past, there is no future, there's just the now, and that now is becoming, and it is crystal hot and flowing and molten and full of potential, right? And that is why, if that's the way you're going to worship your God, he may as well be dead, because you don't get it yet. You're not there yet. You haven't snapped. You haven't popped. You're not that volcanic island that Wyndham Lewis so wonderfully expressed. And if you don't know the reference to the island thing, then you're going to have a great adventure through the most important ideas of literary history and philosophical history. Now, that's the first part. And the second part is really the myth of the eternal return, which is the mindset game that you play in order to keep yourself in that present moment and snapping and popping, which is to say that the myth of the eternal return is to imagine yourself being cursed to live the same day over and over and over again, right? How would you live that day so that you could not only tolerate the curse of living it over and over and over again, but that you would do it with bliss and joy? Now, there's not necessarily an answer there, but one of the answers that Nietzsche gives in a roundabout way is to be like Nietzsche. Which is funny, right? But that's what he says. He says the secret to living the good life is to live like Nietzsche, which in Ecce Homo comes down to having a walk every day, farting when you need to fart, and just being alive in the now. And writing good books if you can. That's basically what it all comes down to. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, but I would say that Nietzsche was definitely a warrior of the mind and not so much an Übermensch, because the Übermensch is always yet to come. And, what was it? Du kannst für dein Freund nicht schön genug putzen, den du sollst eine Pfeil und ein Pfeil und einem Übermensch, what was it? Du kannst für deinen Freund nicht schön genug putzen. Du sollst ein Pfeil und eine Sehnsucht nach der Übermensch sein. Yeah, so what it means is, I butchered that really badly. It's been years since I quoted that. But he says, you can never prepare yourself properly for your friend. You need to be an arrow and a longing after the superhuman or the Übermensch, the overman, however you want to, the overhuman, however you want to translate that. I think we've already translated it to the nth degree in what we've said. You cannot prepare yourself enough for your friend. You must be like an arrow, a file, or a longing for the overman. So what is he saying here? He's saying that your friend is always becoming the great thing that they will become. And you have to prepare yourself to be the servant as if you were an arrow, boom, going towards that thing that they're going to become. So there's a bit of Zeno's paradox being referred to here, but it's the most important message in the world. And it's why his philosophy has grown. It needed the 1970s and the problems in 1968 to help revive him into the system. But it's one of the reasons why that philosophy is so important, because it's a great reminder that now is now, and it's only now, and you will never reach the goal. Because the arrow never reaches the goal in Zeno's paradox. The goal isn't what matters. It's the flight of the arrow that matters. And it matters that the flight of the arrow is for the other, not for the self, but for the benefit of the other. You cannot prepare yourself well enough for the friend. Now, some people are going to be like, well, then if I can't, why should I bother? They don't get it yet. You should bother precisely because it's the only thing worth doing while we're here. Very, very important. So I hope that answers your question in a roundabout way. But those ideas are common to the Abba moment in the Bible. So when Moses goes to see the burning bush, what does the burning bush say? I am becoming that which I will become, right? And anybody who switched on to that would be like, well, that's all that's happening. It's all just the great becoming. That's all there is, this and nothing else, right? And you can never prepare properly enough for the future because it hasn't happened yet. All you can do to be at the best possible stage of your own game is to be preparing to be the best for whatever comes, for your friend, for the other, right? What is the burning bush sending Moses out to do? To be the servant, right? It was Moses that saw the burning bush, wasn't it? Been a long time. Carrie Ann Moss. It was Carrie Ann Moss who saw the burning bush. No, it was Neo. Anyway, these things are common. These ideas are common. Nietzsche, like so many, was not particularly some giant investor. Ooh, that scares me every time. Inventor, but he found his way. Hello. You're live on our little live stream about memory.
Hi, this is Sue.
Sue.
The accounting student.
Oh, the accounting student, Sue. So S-U, not S-U-E.
Yes.
Excellent.
Right, unique. Okay, so I have a question. So I am considering getting your course, so I'm probably the only newbie here. It sounds like everybody kind of knows each other, so I guess I'm in a good place because you guys can give me advice. So when I get your course, how does it work? I see that it's the Memory Palace, but how does this start? So I see a whole list of different things going on here, and I have no clue how that works.
Right. Great question. Thank you for asking. So, yeah, there are a lot of people here who are already in the training, and that's good. So if they care to chime in how it works, that's great. Technically, how it works is I recommend everybody start with a course called the Master Plan. And it's, as we've talked about today, the real deal happens when you complete the course. There's no sort of getting around it. And one of the reasons why is because there are some special tools at the end that help integrate everything, but they only really make sense to start using after you've seen the big picture. And then you want to complete the exercises. Now, we talked about what those exercises are here today. Memory Palace Network, some sort of list, and you'll be guided through creating these lists. And if you do those things, then you're going to have a learning project. So you have laws and accounting sort of things, if I remember, as you were mentioning earlier today.
Yes.
Right. And so once you have these tools in place, you can practice with other things, or you can start to practice with what it is that you need to memorize. And to do that is going to require you to then find a starting point and say, okay, this is the amount of information that I need to memorize. How best can I map these things together? And you don't have to do it alone, because if you can just explain more about what it is, then there's ways to get support and help with it. But at the end of the day, one of the fundamental values that we have here is to encourage you to be a fulfilling individual, a person who's able to become what you're going to become, which only happens when you dive in and arrange the stuff and you figure it out, because no one else can actually do it. It's your memory palaces, it's your tools, and the organization of the information is yours to do because you're facing the exams or the qualifications that you need to face up to express that you're going to be the qualified person that gets the deal. So, or the job, or whatever it is you hope to do. So basically the distinguishing factor, and it is honestly where some people struggle, is figuring out exactly how they're going to use the techniques for that knowledge. But there's tools in the course, which if you complete the course, teach you how to do that. And obviously, if you have questions, we can help. But we're training you to be able to do this because you're the only one who can.
Right. I completely agree with that. Like I got the 4 videos. I did the A through Z list. I've got my 10 places, but I stopped there because I'm like, okay, I don't know what to do next. There's no more. The end of the road. I don't know what else to do.
Right. Well,
so that's where your course comes in.
That's where the course comes in. And one attitude to have is, do you essentially want to be like a martial artist of your mind and be able to not just achieve this goal, but for the rest of your life, memorize names of people that you meet, right? Start to learn languages, etc. So there's the upfront goal, which is great to have, but then do you really want this skill? Like, it's a lifestyle at the end of the day. We come to eat this stuff. Like, we love it because it's so profound what it does to your brain, and it actually changes your physical brain. And so you have to think about that. Like, do you really want to become this quote unquote superior memory person? Because you'll have to take on certain responsibilities as a result, right?
Yes, I agree with you completely. I believe like the more you learn, the younger your brain gets. I love it all, and I love your attitude. You're very zen, and I love that. That's one of the things that attracted me to this course. Just your attitude is very chill. But the last question that I had is, which program do I go in through? Like, for example, I would like to have support. I like how you have a community here, but I don't know that I'm going to be available whenever there's a chat. So is there another, like a forum or something else? I don't know anything that's going on, so that's why I'm asking.
Right. There is a forum, which is magneticmemorymethod.com/forum. So
okay.
There's that. The masterclass itself is self-study. Masterclass plus mastermind. Then we have a weekly session that's scheduled. So these things that I'm doing now are just not really scheduled, right? They're not scheduled at all. So for example, we didn't do one last week, but we do, unless there's some special circumstances, we meet every week for the mastermind group, but that's in the mastermind. So it's masterclass plus mastermind. And the majority of people actually watch the replays of those sessions because of wherever they are in the world. But if you get a question in, then we can cover it. And then you get the replay if you can't be there. And it's just interesting how it all works, because some people, they show up like a year later and get really involved or whatever. Like, you talk about being zen and all that sort of stuff. Well, we're pretty zen. It's you taking some self-responsibility for yourself and coming to the dojo. We call it the memory dojo when you want to train, right? And the results that you'll get out of it really come from how much do you want to train? How much do you want to show up and be involved?
Okay, great. So then when I am enrolled in the masterclass course, then that comes with the dojo, or should I just email you?
Yeah.
More information? I don't know what to get. There's so many different things on there. I just want to get in the right thing from the first point because I'm ready to go.
Awesome. Great. So yeah, send me an email and I can make this much clearer for you, what might be right for you. But at the end of the day, if you want support, the masterclass with the mastermind is the best way to go. And that it's something where, a lot of the people who are here today are also showing up to these sessions, and we just dive into the topics with a lot more detail because the people are on the path, and they have different things that happen when you're more into these techniques that really aren't even worth talking about. When it's like things that you talk about at the white level, white belt, that you don't talk about at the black belt, sort of thing. But that said, we don't have belts. We don't have competitions. We don't have bowing. We don't, have anything like this. I took the Russian martial arts Systema for a number of years, and there the teacher is the student is the teacher. And again, it's a process of involvement, progressively learning these skills. And you can learn them very, very fast if you just go through the courses and develop the systems. And then from there on, it's just an adventure that lasts for life. And
that's great.
You can take a break from the adventure. The only thing is that taking a break will de-skill you a little bit, but you'll still have the fundamental skills so you can survive when push comes to shove. You just might be a little slower making the connections and so forth. But the more you practice, the more on spot you will be. The only thing that can really interrupt is if you do stuff like I do, where I stop drinking coffee and I'm feeling a little bit rusty around the edges. But that's the worst that can happen.
And then I see that Adolfo just mentioned the Facebook group, so I'll find you guys there. Sounds good. Thank you so much, Anthony. It's so nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Sue. Thank you for all your great questions, and hope to see you soon.
Yes. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Take care. Fun. All right, that was great speaking with Sue. And let's see, we got a lot of chats coming in here. Feel free to call if you want to call on our little live stream here. We were lost in the weeds with Nietzsche there, which I love. Scott says it is important to better yourself always. Yes, indeed. I think we covered that one. William confirms he was referring to Nietzsche. Scott says, do servitors ever play a role in your memory techniques? I'm guessing, Scott, where does the term servitors come from? You may be referring to a concept that we use that I just don't know in that terminology. Reclaiming Life says, let's make new bracelets. WWND instead of WWG. That's over my head. I don't know what that means. I'm not a bracelet guy, so you'll have to explain. David says, 26 memory palaces seemed like a lot when I started. Now I'm learning Arabic, and I'm going to be stinging additional memory palaces on the back end of my BT and S palace. I mean, maybe adding. Avash is here. Hello, Avash. Thanks for joining us. If you're just joining us, hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking. And Avash says, once I commented about to-do list. What do you do? To memorize a to-do list. Well, to memorize a to-do list, some mnemonists swear by this. Darren Brown, for example, in Tricks of the Mind talks about this, that he's much more likely to get stuff done if he has memorized the to-do list. I did that for a number of years, but I found that, look, there's things you can do with memory palaces that you don't necessarily need to do just because you can do them. And I don't know that Darren Brown still does that. That's just what he talked about in Tricks of the Mind. But to memorize with a memory palace to-do list is very simple. You make the memory palace. You make it so that it has a little bit more space than you need for your normal to-do list sorts of things. And then you encode the things that you need to do in the list. And then you use the tools of recall rehearsal to get it into long-term memory. And away you go. Now, how that's going to play out in your life and this is what we just talked about with Sue, it has a lot to do with you figuring out how that this maps out in your life and your system. And it's very, very important to be able to do this from your material. So please just dive in and try and see what happens. And if it's just 4 things, I mean, that would be if you just had 4 things to do, then a cool memory exercise for practicing reusing memory palaces would be to just have a simple memory palace with 1, 2, 3, 4 memory stations, and just constantly reuse it over and over and over again. But my preference is to not spend my memory power memorizing my to-do list. I'd rather, there's usually 4 things I do in a day, and they're just here. Mission 1, mission 2, mission 3, mission 4. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Why use my memory palaces for memorizing Sanskrit and Chinese on my to-do list when I could just write it down? So that's my answer to that. And I'd be curious what to-do list you might need to memorize that would make sense. Now, checklists maybe are different things, but checklists have their place. And there was a live stream I did after there was a certain plane accident, and the pilots were shuffling through the books looking for their to-do lists. And I made a live stream about it. And I sort of said, well, if they just had memorized their to-do lists, then maybe they wouldn't have had to shuffle around for them and crash the plane and kill all kinds of people. But a pilot actually left an interesting comment below that live stream explaining why that the checklists are good to have externalized. Because, you might be the biggest memory master in the world, but when your heart is pounding and your adrenaline is going and there's just like beep, 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 are you going to be any more successful? Really? Going into your memory palaces? What was my checklist again? Well, no, maybe not. Maybe, though, I think there's an argument both ways. And it's just a matter of that person, that individual. Are they going to do it and what's going to play out? My preference would be that the pilots had that stuff memorized, but I can see his point. And it's not an experiment I want anyone to ever run. I do not want anybody to ever have to run that experiment. Like, what kind of test are we going to do here? Oh, well, the plane's crashing. Can you memorize all this stuff? You could do all the flight simulator tests under the sun. They're never going to give you any kind of play out in the real situation. So there we go. All right. So hope that helps you out, Avash. And thank you for the question. If you're just joining us and you have any questions, type, or give us a call, hit the thumbs up, and let's catch up with this chat here. Boom, 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 boom. Reclaiming Life says there's a video in the mastermind to explain the suggested order for the classes in the course. I've been told there's a good group on Facebook. The Memory Dojo is a great place. We meet and learn more. Actually, what to do, the study guide is in the main masterclass. So you can, that's another thing for you, Sue. There's a study guide there that helps you figure out what to do next. But again, you've got to bring yourself and, just ask questions. One of the things that we have is an effect in the world where a lot of people who have questions just don't ask them. And that's understandable. Some people just, they don't feel like they're going to be asking questions that day. But don't, feel like you have to let a question go unasked. I try to answer them as soon as possible and be as available as humanly possible. Although, as we talked about with Scott, just one guy. And that's why our dojo meetings are so precious, because we're able to help each other. All right. Adolfo says, since I don't use Facebook, I couldn't comment it on directly, but I'm glad you just did since you were active there. Oh, because we have tons of support in the Facebook group. The Facebook thing is, Adolfo says the Facebook group is the only reason I haven't deleted Facebook. I'm questioning the Facebook thing always, as people know, but there are just some people who will only participate on Facebook. So part of the origin of it is to serve those people. And then there are people who won't, which is the origin of the weekly sessions off Facebook and the origin of the forum. Now, there's problems with the forum that we never have been able to figure out, so that the forum can be split between private and public. Still working on that. This is just a matter of finding the right tech people. There's a lot to learn first, and to finding the right people is its own task. But one of the things that we need to do is we need to get that working. But I don't think it'll ever be a replacement for the Facebook group, because there will be people for as long as the baby boomers still stick around Facebook. There'll still be people there to serve. And So I try to be as many places as possible. And the forum still works great for what it is, and I love when people use it. So look, life is just an ongoing becoming. There's going to be challenges and changes. As Reclaiming Life pointed out earlier, there'll be a place for live streaming if it's taken away, and that's probably true. It's just, how we're going to find each other may change, etc., etc. All right. So Adolfo says Servitor comes from chaos magic. That sounds like very fun. Reclaiming Life says there was a fad in the 90s of what would Jesus do bracelets. What would Nietzsche do? I saw a book called What Would Nietzsche Do? I didn't read it. It seemed clear to me that the author probably hadn't read Nietzsche in German. So that could be trouble. All right. Smile says, hey, Anthony, I'm considering getting the masterclass. And now you have the supersized memory special. All I can say is if you have access to the supersized memory special, I want to compliment you because you're wise enough to be on my mailing list and take that offer. Please email me if you would like to go more depth into the differences and the first one. Adolfo says, I'm learning 10 vocabulary words daily. Today I learned 12. Thanks, guys. Awesome. So always good when you can push. And if you've taken the updates on the card memorization course, you'll see that what you've just said relates to something I'm suggesting there, which also relates to the vocabulary memorization course. All right, so if you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat or email me directly or just give me a call. So smiles if you want to call, that's great too. But generally the answer to the differences are that this very, very special offer is expiring, and the email and the registration page lists in great detail what those differences are. If you just want to find the other one, then send me an email and we can get you that link, although we may not be able to get back to you with the time ticking. So yeah, that's the story on that. All right, so if you memorize that number quickly, then you can still call before the show ends, but we're going to start to sum up here. And look, basically learn more by doing and reflecting. You're going to learn way more by doing and reflecting on what you did than thinking in advance. And the whole point of today's presentation was that you want to just dive in and do the development of the tools that are needed in order to make sure that you have the tools to reflect upon, to see how they work together, and then to see how they are applicable to what it is you want to memorize. You want to memorize to-do lists? No problem. You want to memorize rules and regulations? No problem. But you need the tools, and you need to not overthink it. You need to just do. And I think that I was very blessed, because I'm a person who overthinks a lot of things. But I think I was very blessed in this regard because I learned about memory techniques as I was studying magic. And in magic, it is not this sort of thing of like, well, I'm going to overthink this or that cut and to the nth degree. No. Oh, I never should do these on live streams. My hands are too sticky. But I'm never going to overthink this to the nth degree. I'm just going to learn the moves. The moves, they're very simple. So you put your thumbs here and you put your fingers there and so on. And you're able to warp the deck around like that. It's very, very much a just do as the steps are, right? Don't overthink it. Because if I was overthinking, well, what if my hands are too small, or what if this, and what if my hands are too sticky, for example? Well, the answers are very simple. Just find a room that is not hot, and don't do it under lights, that sort of thing. But I was blessed. The whole point is I learned a lot of magic very, very quickly because I just followed the directions. And so when memory techniques came up in the realm of magic, it was just like, I'll just follow the directions. Don't think about it. And I've over the years had many people come and overthink things. And I know it's not that useful to just say, don't overthink it, just dive in. I know that it isn't, but I don't know any other way to say it other than don't overthink it and just dive in, because it is that simple. And the reality is the simplicity of it all is shocking and stunning to the nth degree. You won't even believe you thought it was difficult. You will be amazed that you ever thought this was difficult. In the same way, like, has anybody ever learned a magic trick and you're like, holy cow, I can't believe I fell for that. You know, that's all you did. And the magician is like, no, actually, that's not all I did, because what I did involved, the principles of focused attention. I don't like the word misdirection because it's not what magicians do. They focus your attention in a particular way. But at the end of the day, most illusions are so simple. And you're just like, that's all. Same thing with memory techniques. But like magic tricks, they require a setup. They require finesse. They require practice. And they require a certain je ne sais quoi, which is that you figure it out as you go along and you love the ride. You love the process. Reclaiming Life asks, have you ever seen the video of the person with no hands doing cardistry as a response to being, yeah, I've seen it. I don't know if it's the one you're talking about, but I've seen a guy on Fulas with his feet, I believe. And I've seen a couple of things, but there's like one-handed magicians that they're, what is his name? Richard Turner. I think it's Richard Turner. He's blind and he does the most amazing card magic in the world. All right. Adolfo says, Anthony, maybe you'll consider Google's social media platform for the private MMM group. I'm assuming that more people use Gmail than FB and Facebook. I don't know what that is. But I know they got rid of Google Plus recently, but, yeah, it's possible. I think at the end of the day, you probably understand this very well, Adolfo. Whatever you're going to do, you got to build it as much as possible on your own real estate and not on other real estate. And that's a principle I've always sort of followed. Same thing with your Memory Palace tools. A lot of people want mnemonic examples and they want to use other mnemonic examples. No, that's building on someone else's real estate. Lynn Kelly points out in Memory Craft, I feel like reading that book and speaking with her on the interview. I told her in the interview, I said, man, I feel so vindicated because I've received criticism from stuff that you're just like saying right here as being, so obviously true from the perspective of a mnemonist. You just are never going to use these techniques as well with borrowed mnemonics than you are if you're going to create your own. And the reality is you don't have to create your own. They're already in your head if you follow the teaching as I teach it. So build on your own real estate. Very, very important. But great suggestion, Adolfo. Thank you. I'll look into it nonetheless, because it is already such a world where you need multiple communities in order to get anything done. User preferences and all that jazz. Sue, the Facebook group we're referring to is a secret group that you'll be invited into. And when you're in the mastermind, there's just some instructions on how to get invited. Basically, we'll become friends on Facebook. That's the only way, apparently, that I can get people into secret groups. And then you'll be introduced. And that's how that works. So it's not a Facebook group that you can find. You have to be invited, which is kind of cool when you think about it. And everybody is introduced. And wow, some great things came in last week. Amazing. Oh, okay, so you missed the private part. Yeah, I know it's annoying and it's a couple of steps, but here's the thing. Humans are still involved in the world, and not everything can be automated, especially when you care about things. There's certain things in the world, not everything, but certain things where even if you could automate it, you don't want to automate it. And I liked to make sure that this is a cared for and well-tended group, and I think those who are in it would agree. I mean, Adolfo said it's the only reason he hasn't deleted Facebook yet, and that's a high compliment indeed. Although I'm not even sure that we should be, in today's era, saying anything that might be deemed by a robot or human as critical of any of the robot overlords, because they might take us down. All right. Anyway, I'll regret having said anything later if I need to. All right. Don't forget the first rule of the MMM Club, ... We're all waiting with bated breath to see what that's going to be. All right. So the important thing is that you're going to have cognitive load. You're going to have cognitive load that you're going to need to overcome. But motion helps manage it. So if you just keep moving, you'll develop the skills, you'll develop the tools, and you'll be enabled to manage. Because why do we use these techniques? To make the world easier? No. The world ain't going to get easier. The world is what it is. Information overwhelm is just going to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. As you age, it's going to seem like more and more stuff coming faster and faster and faster. You won't have all the resources that young people have. But if you invest in your mind and you train it, you will be a person in motion, and you'll be able to manage all the load that ever comes at you. You'll have the right composure. If you do the meditations that I also recommend and teach, if you also do the muscle stuff that we talk about, your body will be so relaxed. The only thing that will phase you is the volume of your phone calls. And even then you'll recover pretty quickly. So you got to be in motion. And as important as meditation is, movement is more important than meditation. You've got to keep yourself in motion. So Adolfo says the first rule of the Magnetic Memory Method Club is to talk about Magnetic Memory Method Club. Indeed, indeed. Yes, please do. Spread it as loud and as wide as you can, because these tools of mental literacy are becoming more and more important as information cranks up. And just as we all age, I've noticed differences, and I'm very interested in tracking those differences as I myself age. I'm not that old yet, but differences are creeping in. And very interesting, actually. I was talking to my dad yesterday, and I was like, wow, it must be interesting getting old. And he's just like, no, all I have is more pain and more things to gripe about, to complain about. And I listened to that very deeply, and I just thought, well, that does sound interesting. But maybe there's a way to get there without as many aches and pains, and we'll see if we can beat them. All right. So Adolfo says, I was waiting for you to chime in. Oh, I see. I missed the change in speaker there. Softball. I have a soft head sometimes. All right. So we want to be in motion to manage our cognitive load. Very, very, very important. And action integrates. So as you move, you're going to integrate these techniques. And as I always, make the relationship to Sistema, the martial art, there's so much to learn, but you can never really learn it all, so to speak, because where you want to go with the practice determines a lot of how that you practice and take action. And you integrate that knowledge as you go along, and different knowledge is going to come up for different people because of their outcomes. So the skill sets will be differently distributed amongst the body of participants, because they'll focus more on numbers, they'll focus more on verbatim, they'll focus more on language learning aspects, which can have some verbatim element, but it depends on where you are with the language. The more that you know about the language, the more your verbatim memorization actually goes down, and your raw vocabulary memorization goes up. So it's all different for different people. The whole point is as long as you're taking action, you get the integration. And that's very, very important. Now, the ultimate tool of them all is to let go of the outcome. If you're willing to let go of the outcome, you're going to have an amazing time. And this is very, very important. Very, very important. And I, for a very long time now, tell myself this every single day in the form of a little song, which I would love to perform for you now, which goes Karturagnia prapute phalam karma kimparam karma tajadam kritimahodadao patanakaranam phalamashashvatam gachinirodhakam ishvarapatam nechaya kritam chittasodakam muktisadhakam kayavangmana karyamutamam pujanam japash chintanam kramat. I'll stop there. It goes on for a long, long time. But the main point of it all is it's helping me to remember that the world is here and it operates by principles that no human is in control of. Even your own brain operates by principles you're not in control of. You breathe, you blink, you digest. There's all kinds of things happening. You're not in control of any of it. None of it whatsoever. So the world operates by its own principles. So, why do you worry? Why do you have these needs to control all kinds of things? Paradoxically, we can control a lot about what happens with our memory, but even then we need to let go of the need to control it so that we're loose enough to actually integrate with our mind and to apply the techniques. Anyway, it goes on to talk about how the world is built in such a way that action is taking place, and every action we take, and we're forced to take action, that action creates more actions that yoke us along, so to speak, in this great ongoing process of potential new actions. So you've got to be very careful about the actions that you take, because every action you take will create the debt, so to speak, of you taking other actions, right? Which is why I told Sue earlier, decide what kind of person you want to be and take on that responsibility. Because when you become the memory person, right, you pass all the exams, well, then you're going to be a much more qualified person in your field than the other people, which then means you're going to be the go-to person who's naturally given more responsibility, right? So this is very, very important. And just in everyday life, every action you take begets more action. And you will pay the price, either in terms of paying the price of joy and happiness versus the payment of suffering and sorrow, right? Depending on the actions you take. But every action will get new actions. So how could you pay the price of happiness, for example? Well, you might do really, really well in a year of your business or something like that. But then all of a sudden, now you're in this new category, and then they throw on all kinds of new things, and you're taxed in advance all of a sudden. So you pay the price. And then, in the bad way, it can be that you said something negative to somebody, and then years later, this comes back to haunt you. Whatever you do, you're going to have new actions, because when that thing you said comes back to haunt you, then you're going to have to take the action of dealing with it. And even not dealing with it is an action. So you've got to let go of all that stuff, basically, because it's always going to happen, no matter what. Whether you integrate with it or not, even not taking an action forces you to face the consequences of those actions, right? It's kind of karma in its way. In any case, very, very powerful stuff to keep in your mind. And then it goes on to talk about how everything, because you are forced to do all kinds of things, whether you want to or not, and because the things that you do force you to do even more things, what should you do? Then you should give it all as a gift. It doesn't have to be to a god. It doesn't have to be to anything. It's just a gift to the great ongoing thing that is, right? And expectation, as they say, is the quickest path to suffering. So if you could just get rid of your expectation, all you have is what's happening. It's amazing. It's amazing. It's so beautiful. If you would just do this, guide yourself progressively and position yourself for the results as best as you can, right? And so that's why you need to follow the rules sometimes. And Tony Buzan, bless him in the great memory palace in the sky, he said it beautifully. We were at dinner one night and we were talking about different things, and I was mentioning some stuff that I was going on and things that I learned, and he just put it into the most beautiful phrase ever. The rules will set you free. And human knowledge is in such abundance right now. And some of that knowledge is just rules. And if you just follow them, you'll be free. There are rules in memory that you can follow. And for example, we heard today from Adolfo, cherry picking from the course didn't quite work, but things started to pop when you go through the whole thing. Teachers put courses together in certain ways because that's what they think is going to help the student. But if the student grazes or skims or, heaven forbid, watches on 2 times speed, you can miss so much. And you won't guide yourself and position yourself for the best results. Now, there's a whole topic to be had because we are being progressively trained to be bored by things that aren't changing every 2 seconds, right? Oh my God, this person, they had an introduction. Oh, I'm going crazy, I'm bored. No. Introductions still have a place. One of the things you need to understand is that most of information is redundant. It's the rule of redundancy. And only 20% of anything is ever going to have the meat, right? Now, if you were watching these live streams a year ago or longer ago, I used to talk about the meat all the time. Meat, people are like, where's the meat? Where's the meat? Right? I'd say, well, what is meat? Meaningless edutainment, absurdly thriving on the internet. There's all kinds of people who think, oh, wow, this video was only 3 minutes and now I've learned, no. Even in that 3 minutes, 80% of it was throat clearing and all that sort of stuff. The reality is that the meat is in the whole, not in any individual morsel. So you've got to have the whole. You need to understand the rule of redundancy, and you need to understand also the rule of micro expressions, all this speeding up of content and that sort of stuff. You can get away with it. You can still learn a lot, but you're going to miss out on so much. I stopped 2 times in content a long time ago, and I've gone back through a lot of stuff that I 2 times, and maybe it's because maybe I'm just getting older. I don't know. But I think that I lost a lot just in the micro expressions alone. This is something to really consider. And there's nothing wrong with 2 timesing stuff. I did it a lot. But I think that if you really want to understand the meat, then that's not going to be the way to go. You've got to take things in their human way. Is this always true? No, nothing is always true. But it's just a sort of rule that I set for myself, and it's very, very powerful. And I found that it's super powerful to go through things again. And if you know the podcast, there's a whole post all about the 11 reasons to reread one book a month, as much as you can in a year. And you'll really find a lot of growth comes from reviewing things, rereading them, and pausing to contemplate, and then memorizing things as well, of course. All right, so position yourself for the results. And ultimately, at the end of the day, you do that by belonging to a community that can help nudge you, or if you can't belong to a community, continuing to feed yourself and fuel yourself with positive, inspiring, educational material. Not, where's the meat? But, really diving in, understanding how knowledge accumulates, understanding that your brain needs space to process. It needs introductions. It needs conclusions. It needs the whole picture. And if you're bored by that person, then find somebody else, right? Because, look, it's not like I don't find people that aren't boring. There are people who are boring. There's no doubt about it, to me, in that moment. But I might go back to it later and, I was just in a bad mood that day, or whatever that day. And you've got to release yourself from your judgments, because your judgments are just happening at that time, and they might not be serving you the best way that time. But it's normal. It happens. Something to consider. And when you're in a community that's always, positive and working towards their goals, that can help nudge you and position you, and you learn about new things. Like we learn about so many new books that we can read on these sessions, and even more so in the mastermind, and yada, yada, yada. The whole point is you don't have to do it as an act of will all the time. You don't have to rely on your own resources, and you don't have to wait to be motivated. A lot of people think, well, I'm waiting for inspiration. I'm waiting for motivation. Don't wait for it. Make it. Make it by taking action. Very, very important. And then exploration and analysis beats the shackles of standing still. And that's the number one reason you got to stop overthinking the memory palace, because you want to live your life in such a way that you always say, if something didn't work out, you can say, oh, well, at least I tried. And I gave it the good old college try. But you don't want to be like, damn, I wish I would have done that. So many people I get emails from every single day. Why don't they teach this in schools? I wish I would have had this 20 years ago. I wish that I would have, given this to my children when they were younger, etc., etc., etc. Well, you don't want to live your life that way. Oh, I wish. If anything, if it's not going to work out, then you want to have the resource so that you can revisit it again later so that it can. I've taken many trainings a second time and, I missed that the first time. And then I go and try it again. Boom. Again, you can listen to that interview with Kevin that I mentioned earlier on the podcast, and you'll hear that how that happened to him with memory palaces. He's just missing some of the details makes it very, very difficult to proceed properly. And then he comes, gets the details, and bang, presto, everything goes. So it can happen. And there's many ways that happens for many people, including myself, in many, many areas. All right. So let's check in with our chat here. Reclaiming Life says, when you said you remind yourself to let go of the outcome of a little song you were going to perform, I was waiting for you to start singing Let It Go from Frozen. I haven't seen Frozen, but we've made it a goal to see Frozen because yesterday we went to see Toy Story 4 and there was the preview for Frozen 2. So my wife really wants to see Frozen Part 2, so we got to see Frozen Part 1. And maybe I will fall in love with the song Let It Go. This is funny. Speaking of Toy Story 4, what an amazing example of propaganda. I've never seen such a blatant, wow, unbelievable. So let me know in the chat if you want to hear a big tirade on Toy Story 4. If not, I'll keep it to myself, or maybe on my film studies channel one day. But man, that movie was shocking. Unbelievable. Very good. And that's the problem. That's why it's hard to see. Easy to miss, but man, is it ever over the top. Jeez Louise, as my mum would say. Or Jiminy Cricket, as she also likes to say. Good old mum. All right, so Adolfo says, I decided to take the next take off the next semester so I can tune up and master the MMM. I'm currently a brown belt and want to return to school as a black belt. Amazing. Wonderful, wonderful. Adolfo says, Sue, you're going to love the Facebook group. Tons of help from folks from different backgrounds and experiences. Excellent. Excellent. I'm glad you find it so. I certainly find it so. Very inspiring and amazing. Amazing. Like, who knew that a new version of mind mapping would just spontaneously appear like this? Wow. Light up Toy Story. All right. Okay, so if you've seen Toy Story, then you'll know what I'm talking about. If not, this might be a bit abstract. But basically, Toy Story 4 starts off reminding you about the narrative world and all this kind of jazz. And then it takes you to a new level and new messages. And one of the core themes is that you got to let go of the outcome, actually. It's a great, look, I'm not complaining about the story. It's a great story. And actually, the core theme is let go of the outcome. And the spoiler alert. So ditch the webinar or the live stream if you don't want to have this spoiled, because there's no way to really talk about it without spoiling it. But basically, the idea is that Woody is... he's really attached to the children, to his kid, more than his kid is attached to him. And his attachment is not really so much about the kid. It's about the outcome that the kid will face in life without recourse to the fantasy world that toys give you. right? So this is very good, nice setup, and it's very existential because one of the things that the kid demonstrates that shows how useless Woody's need for an outcome is that she's not allowed to take toys to school. So when she gets to school, albeit with help from Woody, she just makes her own toy out of a spork and some of these, what do you call them, pipe cleaners, and so on. And this new toy is called Forky, and Forky is trash made from garbage. And so he has the existential problem of constantly wanting to throw himself into the garbage can because he's made of garbage. And it's beautifully done. It's beautifully told and situated, and it's got a lot of, the ways that it knocks off the jokes. And by the way, Toy Story is a perfect example of the structure, these are two useful tools for memory, by the way. So this isn't really a deviation. It's a beautiful structure of the narrative mechanics of the rules of comedy. Why does comedy work? It's because there's usually a machine, there's a baby, and there's an animal, right? And so in this case, Woody's kind of like the machine, and the animal in this case is Bo, and she's a subtle animal, but an animal nonetheless. And then the baby is Buzz Lightyear in this particular case. And they can change and so forth. But if you think of Golden Girls, for example, that's maybe an easier mental model to see how these structures play out. But they're very, very much. You can see one person is the machine. Everything's just like got to be on time. Everything's got to be proper. There's rules and ways things work. And then the animal, of course, is the sex maniac who's still in her old age dating like crazy. And the baby is the mother. The older woman. And so it plays out. If you see Groundhog Day, same thing with the machine, the baby, and the animal. And in that, actually, Groundhog Day is an interesting thing because he plays all of those roles, sometimes simultaneously, but they're still spread out across the characters. Anyway, all of which is to say that if you understand those mechanics, then you can think in your memory palaces when you're making your bridging figures and so forth, that could this person be like a machine? Could they be like a baby? Could they be like an animal? And then you make it much more comedic and interesting to your mind. So studying film studies is great. And I've asked people if they would like me to release my film studies course that I shot and had edited in full and only released a sample on YouTube on my film studies channel. And people have said yes, they would be interested in that. So I got to maybe accelerate and get that done because it is all done. It just needs to be added to the masterclass. Or some place like that, so people can get it. But anyway, the tools of knowing how story works are huge for your memory, and that's one example. Now, what ends up happening in the story is that there's an antique shop, and it's an antique shop where the toys are never bought by anybody, and there's really great stuff that goes on in there. And there's a bad guy there, or a bad girl, as the case may be. And basically, this is where the propaganda comes in. That is so bad for society. Unbelievable. So basically, bad guy, it becomes an infiltration story. So there's this location that needs to be infiltrated by the good guys to rescue from the bad guys one of the toys. And then ultimately multiple of the toys need to be rescued from this situation. And that bad captor ultimately kind of wins. Well, it does win at the end of the day. And I won't say why, because it's a huge spoiler. But the bad guy wins. And then the bad guy gets Woody's sympathy, because we know from the lesson of the movie that Woody needs to let go of the outcome. And because he can't let go of the outcome, the bad girl gets the sympathy of Woody, who then arranges for her to have precisely what he wants, or wanted, before he learned his big lesson in his narrative arc. And she gets away with it without punishment. Oh, this is irritating to the nth degree. Not because I find it personally irritating, but because it's bad for the species. It's bad for humanity that this, in such a movie this big, has the bad guy get away without punishment. Not good. Not good. It's narratively out of balance. It's structurally out of balance. And the messages, the reasons why that there should be some sort of punishment, or at least a lesson learned by the bad guy, is that we're living in a society now where people are, basically going bananas over safe spaces and all this kind of stuff that is just ridiculous. And this movie is only accelerating that by having a bad guy that not only is not punished in any way whatsoever, but doesn't even learn a lesson. No lesson whatsoever. Now, to be fair, maybe there'll be a sequel, Toy Story 5, and all the other characters will be gone, and like Woody's out. Woody's out because he learned how to let go of the outcome, and basically he's just going to be like, on the ranch with Bo. So that was kind of cool how that ended out. And he learned a lesson. He was able to let go of his kid. More importantly, he was able to let go of the fantasy of what he thought his kid needed, right? Which is very, very important to everything we're talking about today. You got to let go of the outcome, right? Because you can't control it anyway. So his control freakism is resolved. But at the most crucial level, there's bad, poisonous propaganda that's going to reach millions, if not billions of people, which is that it's okay to, not learn a lesson in life when you're the bad guy. And, Mr. Woody will, somehow secure your safety and your future for you, and you won't have to do anything without any punishment whatsoever. So, and you can just smell it everywhere in the culture right now, to the point that, unbelievable. I wrote about Toy Story in my dissertation on friendship, so I'm a little bit into it in some sense. And one of the things that was very, very important about Toy Story, the first movie, for what I was talking about with friendship, is that it's an example of truly virtuous friendship, which is exactly what we talked about earlier with the Nietzsche quote. You must, you can never prepare yourself enough for the friend. You have to be the arrow and the longing for his great becoming. That's essentially what I would translate Übermensch as. His always becoming whatever he will become or she will become. This is completely robbed, and it's so obvious that it's coming out of the sensitivity matrix, so to speak. So that's my speech about Toy Story 4. Really entertaining movie, but shocking in every respect in terms of its propaganda power. All right. So, catching up with our chat. I hope that that lit it up for you there, Renee. Adolfo says, Sue, today I video chatted with a Magnetic Memory Method member from London. We were both taking advanced mathematics university courses, and the exchange of ideas were mutually helpful. We all help each other out. Awesome. Yeah, that's the goal there. Glad that you guys are doing that, and wonderful, wonderful. Smile says, Anthony, do you think I could memorize speak to that I've written? I don't understand the question, Smiles. Oh, could you memorize a speech? Yes, you can memorize a speech. Absolutely. So that little ditty that I just recited there was all memorized. And I memorized a speech the exact same way that I would memorize that song. Word for word. One word at a time. In a Memory Palace journey. Now, one of the cool things that you'll learn is that you can actually memorize multiple words on a single station and have some flow to it. And but yeah, you can do it. Absolutely. And there's material on speeches, and they're going to help you do that. In your case, I would make sure you can memorize words first. Before you worry about memorizing hundreds and thousands of words, worry about being able to memorize individual words first. So I would take the master plan course, then follow up with the vocabulary course, then take the poetry course, and then take the speech course. That'll pretty much get you into action. All right. Sue says, like Rocky 27. I haven't seen that one yet, but I'm sure it's coming. The last Rocky I saw was probably Rocky 3. But Stallone is an interesting filmmaker. I don't know to what extent he wrote any of the sequels or produced them or directed them or was involved in whatever part, but he certainly was a great individual. All right. So Chroma Wagon says, appreciate you. Oh, I appreciate you as well. And thanks for prompting me there to go through the Toy Story thing. I've been thinking a lot about doing more of my film study stuff, because that channel, it still is getting subscribers all the time and stuff like that. Anyway, we'll see. It's very powerful, I'll put it that way, to understand narrative. And it has implications for just understanding life as it unfolds, because there's a reason why that we even make stories in the first place. And there's a parallel structure that seems to map itself. And if you can tap into that, you're more able to be the hero of your own story, because guess what? Whether you think of yourself as a hero or not, it's happening to you. The spotlight's on you one way or the other, at least as within your unit in the great oneness. All right. So Adolphus smiles. There is a course in the masterclass for poetry memorization. I personally memorized a 5-page essay, not verbatim, but the key points. Wow, great. 5 pages. That's amazing. And you could memorize it by definitely verbatim if you wanted, and I know you could. Here's the thing, though, about speeches. I don't think they sound very well by very many people when they're memorized verbatim. It depends, though, and I'm sure Smiles is the kind of person that if they're going to recite verbatim, they're going to make it awesome. But there are a lot of people who fall flat on their face when they do speeches verbatim. And one of the reasons why is because unless you're very skilled, you sound like you're reciting from memory, which is not necessarily what you want. So I personally memorize my speeches point by point based, and I do it from existing knowledge so that I'm flexible to add new things that come to mind while I'm doing it. And there's a particular process that I follow that you can learn about. But if look, I had a mentor. I took training to do video better. I should take some more, actually, because it's been a number of years since I took that training. And the number one thing he said is like, great, you can memorize and you're saying all this stuff, but you look like you're reciting from memory. You'll be a lot more relaxed if you just either, do bullet points from memory, or you actually just read from a teleprompter. And so there's no shame in it, because I look like I learned, just look like I'm reciting from memory. And I'm not going to spend all the time for, YouTube videos and stuff like that to memorize them when I'm never going to give that speech again. So it just only makes sense to actually focus on the performance and the engagement and making them interesting for people. If I were to memorize things and I was going to do a speech, like something that I was going to tour around the world, then it would be a game of memorizing versus performance. So I sang you a song today. I've never actually practiced performing it, but I'll bet you any money I'm not a great performer of that song. But there are some great singers in Sanskrit who obviously have practiced performing it. And so that's very important to understand. So there's basically, the point is the memorization of the speech can be the least of the work. A lot of the work can be, can you perform it? And there's 2 examples I can think of. So Kevin Ayers, he was on my podcast with his daughter, Imogen Ayers. So you can listen to them. And on that page, there's his TED Talk. He's reciting it from memory. You can see how that sounds. And Jonathan Levy, he actually has a memory palace that I showed him how to draw on his TED Talk. And he said he wished that he would not have memorized that speech word for word. And to be fair, I understand exactly why. His speech is good. The content is amazing, but it does sound kind of stilted. And it sounds stilted kind of in the same way that my video coach or video trainer just told me. He said, great, like you got it. You're not humming, you're not hawing, you're not hesitating or whatever, but you still look like you're reciting. And it's not loose. It's not free. Whereas if you use this other technique that I use, I go and just give speeches and it's just like nothing. Butter. Not that I'm the greatest speech person, and I'm not saying that to sound arrogant, but I get invited again and again and again to go and give these speeches because they're somehow entertaining. But they're all from memory palaces, just not word for word. And I wouldn't do it that way because I don't think I would. It's not Shakespeare, what I'm presenting anyway. If it were, there's where you focus on something. But if I say, get thee glass eyes and like a scurvy politician pretend to see what thou seest not, right? Is it memory that's so impressive there? No, it's gonna be the character, right? Not that you know the character, but if you know where that's from, if I were performing it well, then that would be great, Tickle us, do we not bleed? Tickle us, do we not laugh? Prick us, do we not bleed? Wrong us, do we not revenge? See, I couldn't even perform it because I made a stumble there, but I have to do it better. Tickle us, do we not laugh? Prick us, do we not bleed? Wrong us, do we not revenge? No, obviously, I'm not an actor, right? But if I wanted to become an actor, I would have to practice that. So memory is different than performance. And then there's the performance of memory. And so a lot of actors are very interesting to talk to because one of the things I learned, and I've done acting before, not very well, but I know a little bit about it. And one of the things that you learn is to separate your head from your chest, from your belly. That's an old Chekhov thing. And so if I were to go and refine these little Shakespeare things that I've memorized, I would think, well, is that character in their head, or are they in their chest, or are they in their belly? Anyway, that's a bit of a deviation, but something to think about, and very, very powerful. Exploration and analysis beats the shackles of standing still, as we've seen today. So that's it for today. I'll just remind you, don't miss this video with Alex Mullen's memory tips. You'll find it very, very useful. That's here on this YouTube channel. For those of you in the mastermind, your new video is out for June, and July will be in a couple of weeks. And you'll know it when you see it because it has this guy on the cover. And this is cool because it's going to give you an easier way to practice the telesynoptic technique, or at least a potentially easier way. So dive in there for those of you in the mastermind, and that's in the Memory Vault for 2019. Obviously, you've got all the previous memory vaults if you want to dive into those, but depending where you're at in your journey, this will either be something that you visit later or just dive into immediately. And coming soon, this video, probably release on Tuesday for North America. 3 things to remember. Just some ideas for y'all to up your game wherever you're at. And also, this will be coming soon. And I know Adolfo asked for a sample of this. Let me just say that this is going to be great. I'm about 20% through it, and I think it's going to be the biggest, most impactful, and most powerful course that I ever release. At least that's my intention. And I let go of that outcome the instant I have it, because I don't know what's going to happen, and neither does anybody else. But let me check in with the chat one last time. If you have any last questions as I go through to make sure that I covered everything, let me know in the chat. And if not, then we'll wrap up another wonderful live session. Thanks, everyone, for being here today. Really appreciate it. Appreciated speaking with Scott and Sue on the phone. And always your participation is wonderful and amazing. And let me see here. Sue says, I can't wait to learn how to put accounting principles in my granny's house. Excellent. Yeah, that's cool. In my recent Memory Palace thing here, I have one with my grandmother. So I just did another one with my grandmother. I have a couple of Memory Palaces with her, and I just thought, you know what, this is really small, but why the heck not? And actually, after I drew it, I realized there's a way to make it a bit bigger. My grandma was awesome. Yeah, I wish I'd known her better, actually. I've always thought I would give my daughter her middle name. Her middle name was very unusual and interesting. It was Alixta. Isn't that a nice name? Alixta. Anyway, yeah, grandma memory palaces are awesome. That's all I'm saying. They're really, really great. Assuming your grandma was great, which I assume that she was. Smile says, instead of memorizing a speech exactly word for word, what about memorizing a speech using keywords? Yeah, well, just catching up with your chat now, but that's basically what I was jamming on about. But I do something a little bit different than keywords, because there's something even more powerful than that. So stay tuned for that. Wait till you use your granny as a bridging figure. Next level. Thumbs up to that. By the way, if you haven't hit that thumbs up yet, boom, do so now, please. And that tells the robots that humans care about the great memory tradition. And that just rings true for anything you like on the internet. The robots are making lots of decisions about what matters. So help train them with your thumbs up. And that really helps out. And share these videos, of course. Leave your comments if you're watching the replay. Get involved in the discussion below. We always have many interesting comments that come up on the replays. Really appreciate those. And so, Reclaiming Life says, with how I mentioned chaos magic earlier, having and fully letting go of thoughts and desires plays a large part in sigil magic, which is very widely used in chaos magic. Something tells me I've just got to get into this world some more. I just don't know. I don't know anything about it. Or maybe I know some things that connect to it, but I haven't gotten to that point where these terms show up. But there's going to be some more explorations along these lines coming soon. We're just arranging an interview now with someone who works in this area, so that's going to be... Or I don't know if it is in this area, actually, but something related to it, I imagine, I think. I really just don't know. But I'm looking forward to knowing, because knowing more is a beautiful thing. And the more you know, the more you can know. So we'll leave it at that for today. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Had a blast. Really appreciate each and every one of you. And go out there, and if you're overthinking anything in life, think about how you can reduce things down to the simplest possible steps and just get started. And you might need to practice just getting started with a few different things. That's okay. But the name of the game is constant progression. You always can improve yourself. It's the only thing you have anyway. All these objects that exist in the world, you don't have any of them. I like this Batman cup. One day it's going to break. You know, it doesn't technically exist. It just is here now. But it's not going to be here always. So you've got to really, really dive in and see that you are the thing in which everything occurs. Only you. Isn't that amazing? Like, if you really think about it, it's kind of a mind warp. But and I'm wondering, Adolfo, how you're finding that book that we were talking about that you got and posted in the mastermind. But you can prove this to yourself in many, many different ways. Everything that exists is existing inside of you, your chemical bath. That doesn't mean different people don't exist, but what it does mean is that those different people that you know, they all exist inside of you. So you owe it to them to improve yourself, right? Du kannst für dein Freund nicht schön genug putzen, denn du sollst ein Pfeil und eine Sehnsucht nach der Übermensch sein. I think there my grammar is back on track. Anyway, in German, again, that means you cannot prepare yourself enough for your friend or for the friend. So you must be like an arrow and a longing after the best possible self that they will become, that they can become, so long as you prepare yourself for them. Reclaiming Life says, did you get JMG for an interview? No idea how to even get in touch with the dude. And the publisher said it might be possible, but no follow-ups have come through. I'll see here, memorizing to-do lists. I ain't going to memorize it. I'll just write down, reach out again for JMG. It'd be an interesting discussion, to be sure. It's just possible that he also said no, but I haven't heard the no. Believe it or not, people do say no to being on the Magnetic Mary Method podcast, or they delay it to such extensive extremes that it never winds up happening. Maybe not the highest point to end on, but that's where we'll end on it nonetheless. Although let me say that if you're in the masterclass and you have a story that you want to share, let's get you on the podcast, because those really, I think, are the most powerful episodes of them all. And I really love them. There's so many now that we have, and going back from the earliest days. So if you haven't heard some of them, check them out and be part of it. It's great to speak to you all and to hear what you're doing and how you're doing it, and to share with others, because this is what we always need to do, is we need to have that other in mind, because ultimately, where do people occur? They occur inside of you. And to take care of others is to take care of you. Some people need to really take care of themselves because they're too sick to contribute or whatever. But even then, part of a way of healing yourself is just to figure out, how can I contribute? How can I help others? It switches on chemicals inside that brain. There's research that shows it must be true. And so it must. But you can't rely on research, can you? You've got to rely on the only thing that matters, which is that you get out there and you take action and you learn progressively, and you do so in such a wonderful spirit of exploration that the outcome doesn't matter. You're much more likely to get the outcome by taking action than you are. Oh, we are here for our safe space. Well, perhaps that's a way of thinking about it, indeed. And on that note, let's all truly be safe in the only way that we can, and that's by becoming a warrior of the mind. Thanks, everybody. Until we speak again, come visit me at magneticmemorymethod.com and keep yourself magnetic. Bye-bye.